Chapter 2031, The Seventh Floor, Whether we contend or not is our business. It has got nothing to do with Miss Yun Xian. However, Miss Yun Xian, please consider it properly. Jian Chen, Chanlong, and I are only going to protect you for a year. If you're willing to spend a year on the first floor, we're more than willing to accompany you. Kaya could not hold back. She detested Yun Xian very much, but since they had agreed to Yun Lianqing's deal, they had to protect her for a year. As a result, the three of them could not separate from Yun Xian during this year. You want me to stay here for a year? Humph, don't you hope so? The three positions into the Neptunean divine palace aren't so easy to take away from our clan, Yun Xian snorted coldly. She no longer remained on the first floor, directly advancing to the second. I'll let you have it easy for now. Once we get to a place with many people, I'll show you how I deal all with you. When that happens, you'll have all the fun you'll get, Yun Xian thought on the way to the second floor. Although the Neptunean divine palace was huge, the four of them reached the second floor before too long. The situation of the second floor was no different from that on the first. Apart from the remains and dried blood scattered everywhere, there was nothing else. Clearly, after people had entered this place several hundreds of times, everything valuable on the second floor and everything that could be taken was gone. The other cultivators who had entered this time clearly possessed some understanding of the divine palace. They had moved on to higher floors long ago, so just like before, only Jian Chen's group was present in such a big area. Afterwards, the four of them continued upwards. They passed through the third, fourth, and fifth floor. Only when they reached the sixth floor did they finally see some scattered people. Yun Xian's eyes immediately lit up when she saw these people, but when she discovered that most of these cultivators were overgods, with only one or two god kings, she immediately frowned unhappily. She snorted gently and said, "To the seventh floor." Jian Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong all frowned as they stared at Yun Xian's back. Clearly, they understood Yun Xian's intentions. This woman is a problem. It'll be nice if she could just know her place, but if she begins to provoke people mindlessly, it'll cause quite a lot of trouble for us, Kaya communicated secretly. Master Chanlong held his azure disc as he nodded in agreement. He said to Jian Chen and Kaya, "We can't act recklessly at all. In the Neptunean divine palace, there are quite a few god kings and even many late god kings. There are even experts from the god king's throne. If that woman provokes a group of late god kings for us, we won't be able to emerge easily with our current strength. Don't worry. She won't be bold enough to act recklessly unless she wants to cause endless trouble for the Yun family." "Let's go," said Jian Chen. His voice was slightly cold. After he said that, he directly made his way to the seventh floor. Gradually, more people arrived on the seventh floor of the Neptunean divine palace. Most of the overgods who had entered gathered on this floor as well as a few god kings. However, they were all early god kings. The formation is too powerful. Just the pulses of energy it gives off are frightening. It must be a primordial realm expert. There must be a primordial realm expert's legacy in there. Just when Jian Chen's group made it onto the seventh floor, a clamor rang out nearby. Several hundred meters away from their location, a great group of people had gathered. They were crowded around a formation as they pointed at it and discussed it. Desire burned in the eyes of many. However, none of them attacked the formation. There was quite a lot of blood around the formation. Hee, I never thought I'd come across a primordial realm expert's legacy right when I got here. I'll get through the formation right now. At this moment, a burly, bare-chested man flew over from afar as he laughed. The early god king presence he gave off forced back all the surrounding overgods. Boom! The man directly struck out, swinging his metal mace at the formation as hard as he could. However, when his weapon struck the formation, all the power in the strike was rebounded by the formation perfectly. It was redirected onto the man, causing him to vomit blood and be blown away. It looks like there really are stubborn people. The Neptunean divine palace has already been opened so many times, and this formation is in such a visible place. Who knows how many people have seen it already, yet none of them have managed to take it away with them. Isn't it obvious that this legacy is difficult to obtain? Let alone you early god kings, even a few experts from the god king's throne would not dare attack the formation, said a black-clothed woman. She sneered at the injured man. This formation is very powerful. Master Chanlong said sternly as he stared at the formation from several hundred meters away. Yun Xian could not help but look at the formation as well, but she lost interest in it very soon. Then, she turned to the mace-wielding man and said loudly, "This sister is right. That big Dumbo doesn't even understand such simple logic. What kind of brain do you have to be so stupid? It really does make people wonder how someone as dim-witted as you can become a god king." When she reached there, Yun Xian lowered her head and seemed to wander into her thoughts. She said doubtfully, "Is God King really this easy to reach? Otherwise, how did this stupid person reach God King?" It was only fair for the black-clothed woman to make fun of the man. After all, she was also a god king, and since he was injured, he naturally did not want to come into conflict with her. Moreover, the black-clothed woman's words were not too horrible. However, now that a mere overgod had scorned him and said such horrible things about him, it was impossible for him, a mighty god king, to just stand by and take it. "You're looking to die." The man paled in anger as his eyes shone viciously. He directly swung his mace at Yun Xian. Yun Xian had already arrived behind the trio before the man had struck out. She stared at the three of them as she took pleasure in their misfortune. Although she knew that with the strength Chen had displayed and Master Chanlong, who had recently become a god king, the man was not their opponent at all, she could cause some trouble for them at the very least. Early god king is only a start. Once we get to the 8th and 9th floors and come across mid-god kings, I'd like to see how you respond. Humph. It's not so easy to be my guards, thought Yun Xian. She possessed great prejudice towards Chen, Kaya, and Master Chanlong. Chen glanced at Yun Xian behind him and coldness appeared in his eyes. Afterwards, he took a step out and directly struck the metal mace with his hand. With a bang, powerful energy and residual sword chi scattered in the surroundings, forcing back the surrounding overgods. Chen had caught the man's metal mace as he stood unmoving. His bright eyes stared at the man as he said steadily, "That was Miss Yun Xian of the Yun family from the Sky Empire, southern region of the profound Thunder Plain. I hope you can forgive Miss Yun Xian's rudeness." With that, Chen's arms suddenly jerked in powerful chaotic force and the power from the laws of the sword surged out. Immediately, a force that the man was unable to endure erupted, pushing him several steps back along with his mace. At the same time, Master Chanlong's presence leaked out slightly, completely exposing the fact that he was an early god king. The man looked at Yun Xian and Chen's group with resentment and ground his teeth. "The Yun family from the Sky Empire, southern region of the profound Thunder Plain. I've remembered that." Humph. With that, the man turned around and left. As for Yun Xian, she was completely stunned when Chen mentioned her background. At first, she stared at Chen in shock before becoming absolutely furious. Why, Yun Xian pointed at Chen. She had been driven speechless. Originally, she wanted to find some trouble for Chen's group so that they would have it difficult in the Neptunean Divine Palace. To her, it was best if they faced enemies everywhere. However, she had never thought that a simple sentence from Chen would redirect it all towards her clan. In the end, not only did she fail to gain what she wanted, but she had even provoked an enemy for the Yun family. Although the Yun family had no need to fear a god king with their status and power, god kings were no longer weaklings in the saints' world. Even the Yun family that possessed infinite primes did not dare to provoke people like that so easily. And this was without considering their background. If they provoked a god king with a great background, it would be an absolute disaster for the Yun family. After stuttering for quite a while, Yun Xian yelled at Chen, "Who told you to tell him my background? Our Yun family has given you entry to here, so is this how you're going to repay us? Do you believe that I'll report this to the Great Elder as soon as I get back?" Chen frowned. Just when he wanted to say something, Kaya had already cut him off coldly. "Miss Yun Xian, weren't you looking down on that god king completely? You cursed him fearlessly, so why are you afraid now? If you're afraid of people knowing your background, you better know your place. With our strength, we're not considered weaklings in the Neptunean Divine Palace. At the same time, you're not even as powerful as the three of us. If you don't learn how to keep a low profile, you'll probably cause great problems for the Yun family if you end up leaving here with your life intact. You might even destroy the Yun family. Perhaps you should feel fortunate, as you only provoked a mere early God King earlier. I hear that even Supreme God Kings from the God King's throne have entered this time. If you accidentally provoke a Supreme God King, you should know the consequences. Yun Xian's complexion fluctuated uneasily. She snorted coldly, "Just be like guards and protect me. You have no right to tell me what to do." Yun Xian no longer paid any attention to the three of them. She looked at the formation that likely hid the legacy of a primordial realm expert, and burning desire flickered through her eyes. Although she had no idea what kind of legacy was in there, it was from a primordial realm expert after all. It did not matter what kind of legacy it was or whether it suited certain people or not. It was enough to tempt many God Kings, let alone Overgods. Jian, Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong all studied the formation. Jian Chen asked secretly, "Chanlong, can you get through the formation?" Master Chanlong furrowed his brows tightly. He was serious as he responded, "This formation was left behind by a primordial realm expert, and they possessed quite some mastery over the way of formations. Although I can get through this formation, it'll take some time." Master Chanlong paused. After hesitating for a while, he continued, "Any formation needs energy to support its operation. Although this formation constantly absorbs the energy of the Neptunean Divine Palace for its operation, there's a limit to the speed. After I became a God King, I've learned a new formation. It's called Heaven's Blockade. If I can push it to the limits, it can isolate the world. The Heaven's Blockade formation is extremely profound. Although I'm unable to isolate the world with my current cultivation when I use it, I can isolate all the origin energy in any place. Even in the Neptunean Divine Palace, it'll be effective. If I cast the Heaven's Blockade formation around this formation, I can prevent it from absorbing the energy of the Neptunean Divine Palace. Once all of its energy is consumed, it'll collapse by itself. It's just that many formations have divine crystals as a backup source of energy. I'm not sure if there are divine crystals in the formation. If there are, even if I separate this formation from the Neptunean Divine Palace, I'll struggle to get through it in the decade we have here. Chanlong, why don't you try it first? What if there isn't a backup source of energy?" Kaya said. "All right, I'll try then," nodded Master Chanlong. Afterwards, he arrived before the formation, and he allowed his presence as a God King to radiate freely. He clasped his hands at the people around him. "Everyone, just staring at the formation won't make it open up. If you want the legacy inside, you need to find a way to get through the formation." The people gathered there all rolled their eyes when they heard Chanlong's words. They all understood this logic, but who was able to get through the formation? He, that sure sounds good. This formation was left behind by a primordial realm expert after all. You've just witnessed its power earlier, sir, so you should know getting through it won't be easy, the black-clothed woman giggled. Chanlong clasped his fist, "Since you're all unwilling to get through it, why don't I try? Please back up a little. I'll cast down a formation right now to get through it." Ha, all right. This king would like to see how you get through this formation." A middle-aged man smiled gently. Immediately, he backed up far away. He was also a God King. The black-clothed woman hesitated for a short while before retreating a certain distance as well. Even the other few God Kings around had retreated, so the actions of the other Overgods were obvious. They backed up far away, leaving a great amount of space for Chanlong. Master Chanlong immediately began to cast down his formation. He tossed out divine crystals and formation banners constantly. What familiarity with casting down formations. This person should be a formations master. The God Kings gathered there were all surprised when they saw Chanlong cast down his formation. Even though they were not skilled with formations, they could tell that Chanlong possessed great mastery over them. Humph, what ignorance. This formation is the handiwork of a primordial realm expert. You're dreaming if you want to get through it as an early god king. Only Yun Xian pouted disdainfully among all the people who watched Qianlong work. Qianlong moved extremely quickly. In under 2 hours, he had completed several formations. Qianlong's Heaven's Blockade formation had severed the connection between the formation and the Divine Palace, isolating it from its power source. At this moment, powerful killing formations began to erupt with terrifying power. Densely packed sword qi constantly condensed and attacked the formation. The sword qi did not possess the power of the laws of the sword. They were purely condensed from energy, possessing the power of the way of formations. These sword qi did not attack messily. Instead, they attacked a single point. That point was where the crucial point of the formation was located. Even though the point changed constantly, Qianlong was able to find it every time. The primordial realm formation could reflect all attacks, and the sword qi were naturally no exception. However, as soon as they had rebounded, Qianlong's defensive formation blocked them, so they failed to injure anyone present. What powerful formations! Early god kings are dead for sure if they fall into it, and even mid-god kings will struggle to break free. The eyes of all the nearby god kings narrowed as they were secretly shocked. Only Jian, Chen and Kaya understood that Master Qianlong's formations possessed far more than this amount of power, because the formations he cast down could change, and their power would increase. Fusion formation, void-splitting 9 swords. After attacking for 2 hours, Qianlong called out, and all the sword qi that the formation could send out condensed together. They turned into 9 huge strands of sword qi that shot towards the primordial realm formation. 9 swords as one. Qianlong formed seals with his hands, and the formation changed again. The power of his cultivation fused into the formations, and even the meter-wide azure disk over his head produced mysterious and profound inscriptions. They resonated with the formations, strengthening them. The moment the 9 strands of sword qi fused together, they erupted with even more powerful might. Even mid-god kings shivered before it. Boom! 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 After just a few more attacks, the powerful formation from the primordial realm expert finally dimmed before slowly vanishing. Obviously, Qianlong did not smash through the primordial realm formation. Instead, he constantly attacked its crucial points, wasting away all of its energy while it was unable to replenish any of it. It had collapsed by itself. As soon as the formation was dispersed, the interior was obviously exposed. A skeleton sat on the ground without giving off any pressure at all. It seemed extremely simple. Only the dull, golden bead among the bones was visible from outside. He was indeed a primordial realm expert before he died. They knew this because this bead was condensed from the power of laws. It was known as a golden core of laws, something that represented the primordial realm. How is this possible? How was the formation destroyed? That's completely unreal. Has this powerful formation that has troubled countless god kings been destroyed by someone in just a few short hours? Everyone was extremely stunned as disbelief filled their faces. It was obvious just how difficult it was to deal with this formation, seeing how it was still intact after so many years. They had never thought it would be destroyed so easily today, which was rather unreal. However, everyone's eyes narrowed soon afterwards. They revealed intense greed and desire as well as great excitement and joy. No one remained amazed at what Qianlong did. At that moment, everyone's eyes had locked onto the skeleton, or more accurately, the space ring on the skeleton's finger. With a single movement, Qianlong had already entered the formation. He arrived before the primordial realm expert skeleton with a flash. Don't you dare! Seeing how Qianlong was about to take the space ring, someone immediately yelled out and charged over with a surging presence. Chapter 2033, Impossibly Powerful Overgods. This was a space ring from a primordial realm expert after they had passed away. It went without even thinking that it contained all the wealth of the primordial realm expert. It might even possess his legacy. An infinite prime's legacy may not be enough to attract people from large organizations with great backgrounds, but it was extremely tempting to independent god kings or god kings from weaker places or organizations. As a result, after Qianlong had gotten through the formation and revealed the space ring on the skeleton to everyone, all the God Kings gathered in the surroundings charged over with intense greed and desire. If Qianlong were a late God King, they would never try to take the space ring away even if they desired it. However, Qianlong was just an early God King. Not many God Kings remained on the 7th floor. Aside from Qianlong, there were only 5 God Kings who remained nearby. Among the 5 of them, 4 charged towards the skeleton as quickly as they could. Only the middle-aged man who had referred to himself as a king did not move. However, these people had all lost their minds from the appearance of an infinite prime's legacy. They forgot that the various formations Qianlong had cast down still remained. The God King at the very front immediately fell into a killing formation. The killing formation immediately began to operate after evolving twice already, sending a huge strand of sword chi straight at him. After becoming a God King, all of Qianlong's formations had become much more powerful, let alone a formation that had evolved over a period of time. As a result, even though the God King was quite powerful, he was unable to respond at all to the huge strand of sword chi. He was cleaved his half, and even his soul failed to avoid that fate. It dispersed. The fate of the God King caused the other 3 people to come to a halt. They stared at the God King who had been bisected as they became even more fearful of Qianlong's formations. Even early God Kings were unable to withstand a single strike once they fell in there. This was more than enough to demonstrate the power of the killing formation. Qianlong was extremely confident in his formations. He did not pay attention to what was happening outside at all. Instead, he directed all his attention to the skeleton of the expert. First, he bowed deeply, and then he took the space ring. When his hand touched the space ring, the skeleton disintegrated silently. Although the vitality in the skeleton of a primordial realm expert could remain for almost forever, this expert had been slain by the samsaric immortal exalt, one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortal's world, through his powers of samsara. The powers had already eaten away at his skeleton, so it turned to dust after the slightest of contact. Master Qianlong sighed secretly at this sight. Even in the entire Saints' world, primordial realm experts were powerful figures. They were respected. However, the primordial realm expert before him had actually been reduced to such a fate, where even his skeleton could not remain intact after his death. It was truly a matter worth sighing over. Master Qianlong slowly picked up the space ring. Without even looking at the items inside, he stowed it away before emerging from his formation. The other God Kings were stunned when they saw Master Qianlong walk out of his formation. Originally, they believed he would use his formation against them, but they had never thought he would come out without any hesitation at all. Did he not know that he would directly face an encirclement of several God Kings without the formations? The light in the eyes of the God Kings flickered. From how fearless Qianlong seemed, they hesitated. In the end, the 3 of them were still unable to resist the temptation of a primordial realm expert's legacy, so with a flash, they surrounded Qianlong in a triangular formation. Just when the 3 of them were about to speak out, a sharp strand of sword chi and the power from the laws of destruction appeared. Jian, Chen and Kaya struck out together. A snow-white streak of light had condensed on Jian Chen's right hand, making it seem like his entire right arm had become a sword. He stabbed it at one of the God Kings aggressively. As for Kaya, she attacked a second God King that surrounded Qianlong with hands full of power from the laws of destruction. "Humph, you dare to attack us as mere overgods? Even if one of you is a supreme overgod, you're merely ants in my eyes." Killing intent flickered through the eyes of the 2 God Kings. One of them wielded a spear, while the other one used 2 swords as they struck out with the laws of God Kings. Immediately, their might erupted, and surging energy shook up the surroundings. At the moment the God King had stabbed out with his spear turned into an extremely thin beam of light, immediately stabbing through space and arriving before Jian Chen. The God King with the spear had naturally witnessed Jian Chen knock away the God King with the huge mace earlier when Yin Xian offended him. However, he still did not treat Jian Chen with much importance. This was because the mace-wielding man was already injured, so his strength was weakened. Coupled with him underestimating his opponent, it made sense for an overgod to knock him away. As a result, Jian Chen was only a supreme overgod from the Overgods plaque in the God King's eyes. As long as he did not rank in the top 10, there was no need for the God King to take him too seriously. As for the Overgods who did rank in the top 10, they all possessed special features that the God King knew. The person before him was definitely not one of them. However, when his spear collided with Chen's sword Qi, the God King discovered to his shock that he failed to gain any advantage at all when he clashed with this Overgod despite his cultivation as a God King. What is this power? The God King was secretly shocked. Chen's strength did not come from the laws of the sword. Even though Chen's laws were much more powerful than the laws the God King had comprehended, this difference could be made up for by his superior cultivation. What truly mattered was the chaotic force that Chen cultivated. Chen's presence erupted as he radiated with surging sword Qi. The sword Qi on his right hand grew once again, from 3 meters long to 6. Like a streak of light, it plunged into the God King's chest. Spurt. The God King immediately vomited blood. He was extremely shocked. Before Chen could control the sword Qi to attack his soul, he immediately retreated rapidly, appearing hundreds of meters away in an instant. At the same time, Kaya was locked in an intense battle against the God King who wielded 2 swords. In terms of battle prowess, Kaya did not lose to Chen at all. As a matter of fact, her usage of laws had already reached a great level of mastery, leaving Chen in the dust. As a result, her battle ended in just a few moves as well. Kaya slammed the God King in the back with her hand, knocking him away as he spurted blood. What terrifying Overgods! In the distance, the only God King who did not take part witnessed all of this personally. He immediately gasped. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 3 God Kings around Qianlong were already injured. The only one that remained was the black-clothed woman. However, the black-clothed woman's eyes widened at this moment. She watched everything unfold dramatically in disbelief as she was dumbstruck. Chapter 2034, A Volcanic World. 2 late Overgods actually defeated 2 early God Kings in an open battle, and they had achieved a landslide victory. Their battle prowess was extremely astounding. At that moment, the surroundings had fallen silent. Whether it was the God Kings who remained there or the Overgods who had gathered in the surroundings, they all stared at Chen and Kaya with their mouths agape. Who are you? The spear-wielding God King who Chen had defeated stared at Chen in complete shock and fear. His voice trembled slightly. Only people who had personally clashed with Chen could clearly sense his strength. The God King understood that with Chen's current strength, killing him would not take much effort at all. However, he struggled to believe that such a powerful Overgod existed. Although he had not clashed with the supreme Overgod ranked first on the Overgods plaque, Cheng, so he did not know how powerful he was certain that not only was Chen no weaker than Cheng, but he was even slightly stronger as a matter of fact. Chen ignored the spear-wielding God King. He looked at the dumbstruck woman in black and asked, "Ma'am, do you still want to contend for this primordial realm expert space ring?" The woman who was also an early God King could not help but shiver inside when she was faced with Chen's sharp gaze. Her gaze towards him revealed some rare fear. "I am Yi Wei, and greetings to you. Your strength has truly widened my horizons. With 2 supreme Overgods and a formations master, there truly is no one on the 7th floor who dares to eye the primordial realm expert space ring. I shall dismiss myself right now." The woman clasped her hands at Chen and Kaya before leaving without even looking back. Many God Kings had entered the Neptunean Divine Palace, but the more powerful ones had already gone to the highest floor. Not only were there extremely few God Kings remaining on the 7th floor, but they were basically all early God King. As a result, the primordial realm expert space ring ended up in Qianlong's hands. There truly was no one on the 7th floor who could contend with the trio for the space ring. The Overgods had not even considered fighting for the space ring. Master Qianlong held the space ring and arrived before Yuan slowly. He held out the space ring and said steadily with his old voice, "You've seen the origins of this space ring. I personally removed it from the remains of a primordial realm expert. I haven't seen what is in there. Yun Xian looked at Master Chanlong rather numbly as she felt more shocked than she had ever experienced before. She was not only shocked over how Master Chanlong could get through formations that late God Kings or even experts on the God King's throne struggled to get through, but also shocked about Jian Chen and Kaya's strength. She had heard that Jian Chen and Kaya were both supreme overgods, but she always believed that they were supreme overgods who did not possess particularly impressive ranks, so she never took it seriously. However, she had never thought that Kaya and Jian Chen would actually be so impossibly powerful, where they could completely dominate early God Kings. This affected Yun Xian so greatly that she still had not returned to her senses even now. She did not even hear what Master Chanlong had said to her. Master Chanlong continued, "There's probably a primordial realm expert's legacy in this space ring. I'll give you two choices right now. You can take this space ring and leave the Neptunean Divine Palace, and our deal with the Yun family will be complete, where we will have no more ties with your Yun family any longer. The other choice would be for you to give up on this legacy and remain in the Neptunean Divine Palace, and we will continue to protect you for the rest of the year. However, we may not be able to obtain a second primordial realm legacy during that year." Master Chanlong stared at Yun Xian brightly. "Miss Yun Xian, which option do you choose?" Jian Chen and Kaya stared at Yun Xian as well. With Yun Xian beside them, they were unable to unleash their full power in many matters. For example, when they fought the two God Kings earlier, they did not dare to focus on their opponent and constantly paid some attention to Yun Xian to prevent any accidents. As a result, they naturally wished for her to leave. Yun Xian returned to her senses. She suppressed her shock, and she closely recalled what Master Chanlong had just said. She stared at the space ring in Chanlong's hand as her eyes flickered with an uncertain light. She was facing a dilemma. It was probably more accurate to describe her visit to the Neptunean Divine Palace as something for playing instead of training. She wanted to see just what kind of place the Neptunean Divine Palace that had attracted so many organizations across the Saints' world was. As a result, she had never considered obtaining a legacy in here. The Neptunean Divine Palace had been opened so many times, so the items that could be taken away easily were all gone already. The legacies that remained were difficult to obtain even when many God Kings used everything they knew. She had come here as an overgod, so how could she compete with those God Kings? Yet right now, when Master Chanlong presented a space ring to her, apart from great surprise, Yun Xian also felt that this was completely unreal. "Humph, you want to chase me away, don't you? I won't accept it." "What can you do?" Yun Xian said suddenly. When Yun Xian said that, she had betrayed her thoughts. She desired the space ring very much because this was what a primordial realm expert of the Neptunean Divine Palace had left behind. It probably contained everything they owned. If she obtained the space ring, it would hold great significance for the Yun family. However, she unexpectedly declined in the end. "Let's go then," Jian Chen sighed gently. He was slightly disappointed. "Miss Yun Xian, I hope that you can behave yourself from now on." Kaya glared at Yun Xian as she said somewhat threateningly. Yun Xian blinked, but surprisingly, she did not say anything this time. They continued on their way. However, after what had happened this time, Yun Xian became obedient. She no longer treated herself as the center of the world, and she would even allow Jian Chen and the others to make the decision sometimes. As a matter of fact, Yun Xian had even asked Jian Chen about which path they should take when they came across a fork. This would have been impossible at the start of the trip. In regards to Jian Chen, Kaya, and Master Chanlong's suggestions and decisions, Yun Xian went from the objection and disregard from before to wholehearted support now. She completely treated the three of them as equals. Yun Xian's drastic change was quite unbelievable for Jian Chen's group. They felt like she had become a completely different person, where they almost did not recognize her. However, the three of them understood that this was all because of their strength. If they did not display their overwhelming strength and allowed Yun Xian to continue to treat them like nobodies, she would not have changed at all. Very soon, the four of them arrived on the 8th floor of the Neptunean Divine Palace. It was a world of volcanoes that stretched as far as the eye could see. The entire place was red, and the terrifying heat even distorted space. These volcanoes were no regular volcanoes. Instead, a primordial realm expert of the Neptunean divine palace had created them through great abilities. The flames were extremely terrifying, where just some scattered sparks posed a fatal threat to Overgods. Jian, Chen, Kaya, Chanlong, and Yun Xian hovered high in the sky. Below them, there was a sea of fire formed from lava. The flames burned extremely vigorously, surging several dozen meters into the sky. From afar, this was an extremely grand scene. The vicious and brutal fire seemed to become the only thing in the world. As it shone brightly, it also hid terrifying danger. Jian Chen glanced out and discovered a few black rocks of various sizes floating in the lava. The smallest ones were only several meters wide, while the largest one was over 1,000 meters wide. At a closer glance, it was quite obvious that the black rocks bobbed up and down in the lava that spewed terrifying flames. The rocks were eye-catching like archipelagos in oceans. Jian Chen took out a medium-quality saint artifact from his space ring and directly dropped it into the lava below. As soon as the saint artifact came in contact with the lava, it reddened instantly and began to melt at a visible rate. In under a minute, the saint artifact had melted completely, becoming a part of the lava. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed at the sight of this. He knew extremely well just how tough a medium-quality saint artifact was, yet even something like that was unable to endure the heat from the lava. The lava was far more terrifying than he had expected it to be. The black rocks floating in the lava seemed to be perlite ore, Master Chanlong cried out as he stared at the black pieces of rock of various sizes. Shock filled his face. Perlite ore? What's that? Jian Chen, Kaya, and Yun Xian were all confused as they stared at the black rocks. Master Chanlong sucked in a deep breath and said slowly, "I've only read about perlite ore in an ancient book, so I'm still not sure if these black rocks are perlite ore again. Let me have a closer look." Master Chanlong immediately flew towards the closest piece of black rock. In the end, he stopped hundreds of meters above a rock that was only several meters wide. The power of his cultivation formed an energy barrier around him to repel the terrifying heat there. The terrifying heat from the lava made it difficult for Master Chanlong to descend. Moreover, after he approached the black rock, he felt like the heat from the rock was several times greater than the lava. Suddenly, Master Chanlong trembled. At that moment, he struggled to remain composed even with his mental fortitude. He sucked in a deep breath and said with a rather trembling voice, "That's right. It's the same as what was recorded in the book. These black rocks are indeed perlite ore. They're a high-grade god-tier material. Probably just a fist of it is worth an unimaginable price. There's actually so much of it here." Jian Chen finally understood what the perlite ore was from that. It was actually a high-grade god-tier material. God-tier materials were split into 4 major grades, which were low, mid, high, and supreme. The God tier was split into a further 9 grades. The 1st to 3rd grades were low grade, 4th to 6th were mid grade, and 7th to 9th were high grade. Jian Chen could not help but gasp as he stared at the black rocks floating in the lava. If all of them were perlite ore, he struggled to imagine just how much it was all worth. Jian Chen descended from the sky. He wanted to land on a piece to inspect it closely, but when he was only 50 meters away from the perlite ore, he could not help but stop. The perlite ore gave off an extremely intense heat. Even origin energy was vaporized around it. It was definitely much more terrifying than the lava around it. Even with his chaotic body, he was only able to reach 50 meters away from the perlite ore. If he took another step forwards, even his chaotic body would not be able to endure it. Probably even late god kings cannot approach these perlite ore. Jian Chen was secretly shocked. At the same time, he felt that it was a great pity. They had just entered a place full of treasures, yet they had to leave empty-handed. No one could emerge in a happy mood from that. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed, and he extended a finger. Immediately, a strand of sword chi shot out. It created a deep thud when it struck the perlite ore below. From the pulse of energy, a red crystal that laid on the pernight ore was knocked high into the sky. Chen caught the red crystal. It was only the size of a chicken egg and oval-shaped. It felt warm, and it seemed to hide an extremely pure fire-attributed energy. Aside from the pure fire-attributed energy, Chen sensed the presence of the laws of fire in the crystal. As she looked at the fire-red crystal in Chen's hand, Xian said, "That's a fire divine crystal." According to the people who have entered here before, fire divine crystals can only be obtained from here, the 8th floor of the Neptunean divine palace. The fire divine crystals contain the laws of fire, so they're priceless treasures to cultivators who comprehend the laws of fire. Not only is the fire-attributed energy in the fire divine crystals much purer than supreme-grade divine crystals, but the constant contact with the laws of fire in them will assist with comprehension as well. Xian glanced at Chen and continued, "The fire divine crystals are extremely valuable. If you take it out, they're worth at least 10 times more than supreme-grade divine crystals." Chen's eyes lit up. He said, "If the fire divine crystal in my hand is divided according to the standard, it'll be 20 to 30 pieces. In other words, if this piece of fire divine crystal is converted into supreme grade divine crystals, it'll be 200 to 300 of them. If I could get even more fire divine crystals." Chen looked at the string of volcanoes nearby and said, "It's impossible for these fire divine crystals to appear on the pernight Oregon. It looks like the volcanoes spit them out. There must be extremely many fire divine crystals at the bottoms of the volcanoes." "That's right. There are indeed many fire divine crystals below the volcanoes. Many people who have come out have confirmed this because every time the volcanoes erupt, quite a lot of fire divine crystals will be let out. Most of them fall into the lava, and only a fraction of them would end up on these black rocks, which would then be collected by people. Unfortunately, the flames here are nothing but extraordinary. As a result, every time the volcanoes erupt, no one dares to approach them. Once they catch on fire, even late god kings can die, so it's even more impossible to venture to the bottom of the volcano. As a result, the fire divine crystals aren't so easy to obtain here," Xian said with some pity. She no longer acted arrogantly anymore at all. At this moment, the fire-attributed energy suddenly began to behave violently. The entire world seemed to tremble as a volcano over 10,000 meters away from them erupted. Fire surged into the sky. The Neptunean divine palace only seemed to be over 100,000 meters long, but the past experts had transformed the interior space into miniature worlds. It was so vast that it was impossible to measure the interior with meters, unlike the exterior. For example, the space of the 8th floor was so great that it stretched for over 1,000,000 kilometers. "Let's go have a look," said Chen before flying off to the erupting volcano first. When Chen's group approached the place, the volcanoes there were erupting. The craters on several peaks spewed out huge pillars of red light composed from scorching lava right at the sky. These volcanoes were not naturally occurring. Instead, primordial realm experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia had personally created them, so the scene of them erupting naturally could not be compared to the eruptions of natural volcanoes. From afar, the fire-red lava that the volcanoes spewed out seemed to plunge into the clouds, making a connection with the red clouds in the sky. It seemed like a link between the sky and the ground, forming an extremely grand sight. Chen's group stood far away. The volcanoes were nothing short of extraordinary. The lava they spewed out filled the group with fear. They could clearly sense that within the lava, there were slivers of power from the laws of fire, and it was enough to pose a fatal threat to god kings. Aside from them, many more people hovered in the sky as well. They all stood around the volcanoes, maintaining their distance. Their cultivations varied. There were overgods and also god kings, but at this moment, all of them had raised their heads at the sky to stare at the lava that plunged into the clouds. Finally, the lava fell from the sky. Flames flickered around the lava as they descended everywhere like terrifyingly hot rain. Wherever the lava passed by, the origin energy in the air seemed to be set alight, where even a gentle breath of it would seem like the internal organs were lit on fire. The range of the lava constantly increased in all directions, enveloping several hundred meters of the surroundings. It forced all the cultivators in that range to rapidly retreat. At this moment, a gleam of light flashed through Chen's eyes. He discovered that there were quite a few fire divine crystals within the lava rain. They varied in size, where they could be as small as a fingernail or as large as a head. It was also at this moment that the cultivators in the surroundings struck out. They either used chain-like or rope-like saint artifacts, and with a single thought, all those saint artifacts elongated indefinitely, allowing them to collect fire divine crystals from afar. These saint artifacts were all high quality at the very least, with many being supreme quality. As a result, even though the lava was extremely terrifying and could melt medium-quality saint artifacts, there was no need to worry about damage if they accidentally got some lava on the high-quality saint artifacts given their toughness. Moreover, all the cultivators would make their saint artifacts avoid the falling lava to their greatest ability so that there would not be any awkward scenes where the saint artifacts did melt during the process of collection. Very soon, all the lava had fallen. They either fell into the sea of lava below, or they landed on the pernight or floating on the sea of lava before slowly vanishing. The heat from the pernight ore truly is terrifying. The reason why the lava has vanished is not because it has become part of the pernight ore, but instead, it has been vaporized by the terrifying heat the ore gives off. They've been burned to nothingness, Chen sighed in amazement. A few fire divine crystals of various sizes also landed on the pieces of pernight ore. There were even more fire divine crystals that had not been collected, falling into the sea of lava. That is quite the harvest this time. If I convert them to supreme grade divine crystals, it should be almost half a block. I am rather lucky this time. I've actually gotten 2 head-sized pieces of fire divine crystals. In the distance, many cultivators who collected the fire divine crystals smiled at each other as they showed off their harvest. They were satisfied. However, not everyone was like that. Some people had failed to get anything, so they were depressed. Let's go to the next area. The volcanoes several tens of thousand kilometers away from here seemed to be about to erupt. Everyone dispersed. Quite a number of people stayed on the 8th formation. Many god kings knew that they were unable to contend for the legacies on the higher floors, so they remained on the 8th floor to collect fire divine crystals when the volcano erupted. The 8th floor was extremely large while the volcanoes were packed as well. There were whole chains of them, regularly erupting with many fire divine crystals. As a result, quite a few people would directly remain on the 8th floor of the Neptunean Divine Palace for the whole decade every time the structure opened before leaving with a lot of fire divine crystals. Chen did not collect these fire divine crystals. Instead, he quietly paid attention to the churning sea of lava below him. He furrowed his brows slightly as the light in his eyes flickered. Xian seemed to understand what Chen was thinking of from his expression. She could not help but pout. There's probably already a thick layer of fire divine crystals from the accumulation across the years. However, you better not attempt to obtain them. According to the rumors outside, no one dared to go down. Even experts on the God King's throne avoid the lava from a distance. I've even heard that some weaker infinite primes can't enter the lava. Chen did not become dejected at all. He said calmly, "Indeed, I am unable to approach the lava with my current strength. However, if I can advance my strength, it'll be different. Let's go." The 4 of them continued onwards. After checking through most of the 8th floor, they went to the 9th floor without any reluctance at all. Chen felt like the 8th floor was especially for nurturing the pernight ore and that there were no legacies on the floor at all. However, he clearly was not powerful enough right now to eye the pernight ore. Let alone touch it. He could not even approach it. As for the fire divine crystals, he was not tempted by the ones from the volcanoes at all because they were just far too few. If he collected them at this speed, he might not even collect enough of them to pay for the fee of a single teleport between planes. What truly drew his attention was the fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava. The matter at hand is to break through with my comprehension as soon as possible. As long as I reach the major achievement of Sword Spirit, I'll be able to progress with my chaotic body. Once I reach the 12th layer of the chaotic body, even if it's not enough to endure the terrifying heat of the lava, I still should be able to last for a while in there. Coupled with the toughness of the Inata Tower, it won't be impossible for me to collect the fire divine crystals at the bottom, Chen planned ahead. The path from the first floor all the way to the 12th floor was no longer some type of secret in the saint's world. After all, the Neptunean divine palace had been opened far too many. Naturally, many people had made it to the 12th floor. As a result, even when some organizations wanted to lock down on the information of the place, they were unable to do so. Although Chen's group knew very little about the Neptunean divine palace, or even basically nothing, they had learnt the correct path up from Yunlianqing. As a result, they easily found the entrance to the 9th floor and climbed up. The 9th floor of the Neptunean divine palace was not a place where regular disciples could enter. Back when the Taoist sect of Neptunia still existed, anyone who could enter the 9th floor possessed great authority. None of them were weaklings. Both the environment and scenery on the 9th floor were especially pretty and impressive. There was an endless stretch of mountains and rivers as far as the eye could see. The water and sky were both a deep blue while pure and rich origin energy filled every inch of the space. It completely exceeded any holy land that Chen had seen in the past. A huge, scorching sun hung in the sky. It was bright yet eye-catching, shining with a mix of colors. It prevented people from looking at it directly. Is this a god artifact? Chen was immediately shocked as soon as he saw the sun in the sky. He had seen many god artifacts already. Both the damaged piece of armor and the Inata Tower were god artifacts. However, all god artifacts gave off an extremely special presence and pulse. Their power was on a completely different level than supreme quality saint artifacts. Right now, he could sense the special pulse that belonged to a god artifact from the sun in the sky. That's right, it's indeed a god artifact. What extravagance! They're actually using a god artifact as a sun. Chanlong squinted as he stared at the sun in the sky. He was amazed. God artifacts were absolute treasures in the saints' world. They were extremely rare. This was because many infinite primes in the saints' world did not possess god artifacts. The treasures they used would still be supreme quality saint artifacts. The appearance of a god artifact, even just a god artifact of the lowest grade, was enough to make many infinite primes engage in a bloody battle against one another. That was how valuable god artifacts were. It must be your first time coming to the Neptunean Divine Palace, a voice rang out from nearby at this moment, and a middle-aged man walked over slowly. He smiled amiably as he clasped his fist at Chen's group. Chen's group had discovered the existence of the middle-aged man right from the start. Just when they had come to the 9th floor, the middle-aged man had come up from the 8th floor as well. They were not unfamiliar with the middle-aged man. He was the only god king who did not attack them when they broke through the primordial realm formation on the 7th floor before. I am Xiao Zheng, and I greet you all. The middle-aged man clasped his fist at Chen's group before looking at the sun in the sky. He said, "It looks like you don't understand the situation inside the Neptunean Divine Palace. The sun is indeed a god artifact, but in the Neptunean Divine Palace, from the 8th floor onwards, each floor is a world. The space of the floors below cannot be compared to them at all. After the experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia in the past created such large worlds, they naturally had to keep them stable so that all the 5 elements were balanced. This sun separates the yin and yang of this world, so it's naturally crucial. As a result, every floor beyond the 9th floor will have a god artifact as a sun, left behind by the past experts of the sect. They separate the yin and yang of those worlds. Of course, there's also the moon aside from the sun. However, this moon only exists in legends. No one has personally witnessed it out of everyone who has entered here. Why? What's so special about the moon? Or should we say that the moon was taken away by someone? Yun Exean asked curiously. She had never heard of this before. Xiao Jing smiled from that. He said, "Taken away? It's not that simple to just take away the god artifacts that stabilize the yin and yang of the Neptunean Divine Palace. Moreover, primordial realm experts can't enter the Neptunean Divine Palace. It's impossible for mere God Kings to take away God artifacts, even if they're ranked first on the God King's throne. That's because it's rumored that these God artifacts were personally set down by those ancestors of the Daoist sect of Neptunia. Xiao Zheng showed respect as soon as he mentioned the ancestors. He said sternly, "Those ancestors are grand primes. They're existences who stand at the apex. Even chaotic primes can't take away things they've set down themselves, let alone God Kings." It's rumored that the disappearance of the moon is related to the calamity the sect suffered from over 3 million years ago. It was like the moon had vanished after the Daoist sect of Neptunia was destroyed. Xiao Zheng paused here before continuing. There is even a rumor in the saints' world that says the sun and moon in the Neptunian divine palace aren't as simple as they seem, and they hold a deeper secret. When the sun vanishes, and the moon rises again, the Neptunian divine palace will experience a great change. A great change? This time, it was not just Yun Xian. Even Jian Chen, Chanlong, and Kaya became interested. Xiao Zheng nodded sternly, "That's what they say." It said that this message came from a supreme expert of the saints' world before being disclosed somehow. It spread through the entire saints' world such that many people know of this now. It's just that no one is certain whether this huge change will be a curse or a blessing, so aside from those experts who can peer into the secrets of the world, no one else has the right to even come close to this secret. At this moment, Xiao Zheng smiled freely. He said, "But who cares if something big will happen to the Neptunian divine palace, right? It's not like it has anything to do with us. Even if the sky comes falling, there'll be those powerful people to hold it up." "Oh right. You don't seem very familiar with the Neptunian divine palace. The 9th floor is so vast that searching it inch by inch will not only be a waste time, but you'll struggle to find anything as well. Even if you come across a dwelling a primordial realm expert left behind thanks to luck, you need to remember that what each floor possesses and where on each floor they are is no longer a secret to those large organizations after this place has been opened so many times. As a result, there must be many God Kings outside each primordial realm expert's dwelling, trying to get through the formations. There might even be supreme God Kings from the God King's throne. With our strength, we'll truly struggle to benefit from anything before them. I just happen to know about a divine medicinal garden on the 9th floor. There's a large number of God-tier heavenly resources planted there and even quite a few flowers of ways. Flowers of ways are divine objects that have the laws of the world imprinted in them. If peak God Kings consume them, they can increase their chances of reaching the primordial realm by several dozen %. It's even somewhat effective on primordial realm experts. They're extremely valuable, so I was wondering whether you'd be interested." Xiao Zheng stared at the four of them eagerly, but his gaze was mostly focused on Master Chanlong. Since this divine medicinal garden possesses so many God-tier heavenly resources, many people must be trying to possess them. Jian Chen looked at Xiao Zheng. Xiao Zheng nodded, "That's right. There are indeed many people in the divine medicinal garden, but because there are many heavenly resources, there's no need to worry about any conflicts of interest. It's just that each heavenly resource is protected by powerful formations. Harvesting them is not an easy matter, but I believe with what this master used to get through the formation on the 7th floor, the formations protecting the heavenly resources shouldn't pose a problem at all." Chapter 2038, A Land Littered with Heavenly Resources. Xiao Zheng, you probably aren't telling us this for nothing, right? "State your conditions," said Jian Chen. Xiao Zheng had approached them purposefully as soon as he had appeared. He was extremely enthusiastic and active, so he probably had some other intentions in mind. Xiao Zheng was surprised by Jian Chen's words before immediately smiling. "You misunderstand. I only saw that your knowledge of the situation inside the Neptunian divine palace was lacking, so I wanted to share some of the information I knew with you, hoping that it would provide you with some hope. And the information I've told you really is no secret. I believe that most people who have come into the Neptunian divine palace know some things about this, so why would I demand conditions for worthless information? Although I can't exactly say I'm a completely righteous person, I'm not shameless enough to do something like that." Xiao Zheng said righteously as his expression seemed somewhat dignified. He gave off a righteous air. Jian Chen looked at Xiao Zheng calmly. He thought of the divine king of the divine kingdom of Pingtian from Xiao Zheng's presence. The presence that Xiao Zheng gave off right now was extremely similar to the divine king. It was the presence of a ruler. Normally, only rulers who reigned over an entire region and had a great status would possess a presence like this. At this moment, Xiao Zheng paused before clasping his hands at Chen's group. He said, "Of course, if you don't mind, I can be a guide for you. Although I don't understand everything about the Neptunean Divine Palace, I do know about most of it." Chen was interested in Xiao Zheng's suggestion. They just happened to lack a guide that could help them avoid a few winds in the road, so he immediately agreed to Xiao Zheng's suggestion. Afterwards, Xiao Zheng joined Chen's group successfully before directly taking them towards the divine medicinal garden. Along the way, Chen and the others got to know Xiao Zheng a little. He came from the Hinyu plain, which was quite close to the Neptunean Divine Palace. As a matter of fact, the Hinyu plain was clearly visible from outside the Neptunean Divine Palace. Xiao Zheng did not come from some large sect or clan. Instead, he was the divine king of a divine kingdom. The divine kingdom's size was about the same as the divine kingdom of Pingtian, but due to its extremely remote location and lack of resources, the entire kingdom only had a single god king, Xiao Zheng. Xiao Zheng had come into the Neptunean Divine Palace many times already. He would pay a certain price each time to buy a spot from other organizations. The 9th floor was simply far too vast. Even when they moved at their full speed, it took them an entire day to arrive at the divine medicinal garden Xiao Zheng mentioned. The garden was located in a valley surrounded by mountains. Only a winding path served as an entrance. What dense origin energy! All the spiritual veins of the 9th floor gather in this valley, where all of them nourish this place. Chen could not help but sigh in surprise as he stood at the entrance to the valley. Under these conditions, even an immortal tier heavenly resource would be able to evolve into a god tier heavenly resource in an extremely short amount of time if it were planted here. They followed the winding path and hovered into the valley. As soon as they entered the valley, everyone apart from Xiao Zheng was stunned by the landscape around them. They stared at it dumbstruck, where astonishment filled their faces. The huge valley was littered with heavenly resources. They were on the ground, the mountain peaks, and the cliffs. It was unimaginable. All of these heavenly resources had reached the god tier without any exception. They were extremely valuable. Even if some of the heavenly resources there were of the immortal tier, they had evolved into god tier under the unique conditions of the valley after such a long period of growing here. The only pity was that all these god tier heavenly resources were protected by a powerful layer of formations. Obtaining them would be extremely difficult. Over 1,000 people had gathered in the divine medicinal garden. They tried all types of methods to get through the formations that protected the heavenly resources as booms constantly rang out. Oh my god, there are actually so many god tier heavenly resources here. Even I have never heard of so many god tier heavenly resources gathered in a single place. Yun Xian sighed in surprise as her eyes burned with desire. Probably no one could remain composed after seeing such a terrifying amount of god tier heavenly resources. There are actually over a dozen flowers of ways here. Chen slowly scanned across the place as he sighed in surprise. In the past, Fairy Hao Yu had killed the 9 god kings that protected the Een Mountains of Seven's despair and even offended the 9th prince of the Blood Sun Empire for a single flower of ways. Yet, there were over a dozen flower of ways here, and from their grade, they seemed to be far better than the one Fairy Hao Yu had obtained before. It truly was a divine medicinal garden. Although there are many heavenly resources here, only a little over a dozen of them are taken away each time the Neptunean Divine Palace is opened. Xiao Zheng sighed gently. Let me get through the formations. Master Chanlong became interested as well. His breath became rather ragged. Clearly, he was struggling to maintain his composure as well. Immediately, he arrived before the nearest heavenly resource and began to study the formation so that he could get through it. At this moment, a bloodied, middle-aged man in tattered clothes ran over mindlessly, charging up the winding path as if he was fleeing for his life. When he discovered the garden, he came to a halt and was slightly surprised as well. His face immediately changed drastically, and he wanted to turn around and flee. The only entrance to the divine medicinal garden was the winding path. There were formations in the surrounding mountains, making it impossible to fly out. However, the middle-aged man was clearly being hunted down by enemies, so coming to the dead end of the divine medicinal garden basically guaranteed his death. The middle-aged man's arrival naturally drew the attention of some of the people nearby. Quite a few people looked over with strange gazes. Yun Xian discovered him as well. However, when she saw the bloodied middle-aged man, her face immediately changed, and she subconsciously called out, "Uncle Lai." The middle-aged man immediately shuddered from that. He stopped unconsciously to look back at Yun Xian as he became extremely stunned. Jian, Chen and Kaya also recognized this middle-aged man. They were surprised. They had seen this middle-aged man before. He was one of the 16 god kings of the Yun family. His name was Yun Daolai. Yun Daolai's surprise only lasted for a short while. After seeing Yun Xian, he immediately ran back, arriving before her in a flash. He shoved a space ring into Yun Xian's hand without raising any attention and said to her secretly, "Take this ring and leave here immediately. Go." After that, Yun Daolai left in a hurry. He seemed extremely frantic. Yun Xian's mouth hung agape as she saw Yun Daolai hurry off into the distance. She wanted to say something before stopping herself. Afterwards, she carefully glanced at the space ring in her hand before clutching it tightly as if she was afraid that someone unrelated to this matter would discover it. Yun Daolai was covered in wounds and blood. He was extremely injured, yet he still wanted to protect the space ring under such conditions. It was obvious just how important the space ring was. Jian, Chen and Kaya naturally sensed Yun Daolai's inconspicuous action, which caused their faces to change slightly. Yun Daolai believed that his actions were extremely well hidden, but it was a pity that he was simply too flustered, probably due to the fact that he was fleeing for his life. He naturally attracted the attention of some people in the surroundings from how hurried he was, so not only did Jian, Chen and Kaya sense his actions, but a few god kings who were attempting everything they could to take the heavenly resources in the divine heavenly garden had sensed it as well. This was because Yun Daolai was only an early god king. There were many people much more powerful than Yun Daolai in the divine medicinal garden, so he was naturally unable to hide it from them. Immediately, quite a few people shifted their gazes from the heavenly resources and looked towards Yun Xian. Many of them bore avaricious gazes. Clearly, they had realized the value of the space ring. At this moment, Master Chanlong had stopped breaking through the formation. He gathered with Jian, Chen and the others, and their faces were extremely grim. The three of them had realized that they were in great trouble now. Yun Daolai was already busy enough with his own matters, so he clearly did not realize just how much trouble he had caused for Yun Xian. He was currently fleeing from the divine medicinal garden as quickly as he could. "I can't let them know that I've already handed the spiritual root of heavenly ways to Yun Xian, that girl, nor can I let them know that the root is not with me anymore. Otherwise, they'll look for it, and by then, not only will the spiritual root of heavenly ways be lost, but even Yun Xian's life will be lost. As a result, I have to draw them far away as quickly as I can so that I can give Yun Xian some time to leave." Madness filled Yun Daolai's eyes. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was the hope of their Yun family to rise up. Even if he had to offer up his life, he had to keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways safe. "Yun Xian, you can't disappoint me. You have to take the spiritual root of heavenly ways out with you," Yun Daolai pleaded inside. He could only place his hopes on Yun Xian at that moment. Yun Daolai did not think too much about whether Jian, Chen and so on around Yun Xian were reliable or not. However, at this moment, a huge strand of sword chi shone brightly, directly shooting over from beyond the winding path. Yun Daolai's face suddenly changed, and he came to a halt. Facing the sword chi, his heart sank immediately, and he cleaved out suddenly with a blade. Boom! Yun Daolai's blade collided with the sword chi. The sword chi dispersed, while Yun Daolai's strike ran out of power as well. However, when the sword chi dispersed, it exposed the laws of destruction instead. The laws of destruction were hidden within the sword chi. The moment the sword chi collapsed, the laws of destruction shot out like an arrow, punching through Yun Daolai's body with lightning speed. Spurt. Yun Daolai vomited blood as his body was blasted backwards. He was knocked back into the divine medicinal garden, and his pale face became even whiter. Uncle Lai. Yun Xian cried out. She wanted to charge over regardless of the danger, but Chen forcefully stopped her. In the divine medicinal garden, a few people who were gradually approaching Yun Xian stopped from the sudden change in the situation. They all looked towards the only entrance to the divine medicinal garden. Chen also gazed over there grimly. An extremely handsome young man in white, loose clothes who seemed to be in his 20s entered the divine medicinal garden at a steady pace with a sword in his hand. Behind the young man was an old man in azure robes. The old man's presence was concealed completely, so he seemed like a simple old man. He's actually only an overgod. An overgod managed to injure an early god king with a single strike. Even though the early god king is already wounded, this battle prowess is shocking enough. The laws of the sword and the laws of destruction. This overgod has actually comprehended two of the most offensive laws. He truly is terrifying. He must be well renowned on the Overgods plaque, and he must be ranked quite high. Discussions began in the divine medicinal garden. Many people communicated secretly with each other as they sighed in surprise. The sword-wielding young man was expressionless and cold. He strode towards Yun Daolai. He did not move quickly, walking just like an ordinary person. However, he gave off a supreme presence. In particular, the young man's cold gaze looked at Yun Daolai like a great lord looking at an ant. It was cold and condescending. It would not have been very strange if a god king was doing that, but the young man just happened to be an overgod. Clearly, Yun Daolai feared this young man very much. As the young man approached him, he retreated as well while his face was ashen. No one can take what I want. Hand the spiritual root of heavenly ways over. You can't keep it, the young man said coldly. What? A spiritual root of heavenly ways? I never thought that someone would have actually obtained a spiritual root of heavenly ways. That's a treasure that even primordial realm experts will fight to the death for. Cries immediately rang out in the surroundings. A spiritual root of heavenly ways. It's actually a spiritual root of heavenly ways. Xiao Zheng was also stunned. He murmured, "It's said that the spiritual root of heavenly ways contains the ways of the world. Not only can infinite primes raise their cultivation by 1 to 3 heavenly layers in an extremely short amount of time with it, but it even increases their chances at becoming chaotic primes as well. It's rumored in the saints' world that all the people who have ingested spiritual roots of heavenly ways have basically become chaotic primes. The remaining people who failed died along the way." Xiao Zheng was the divine king of a tiny divine kingdom on the Hinyu plain. He was not powerful, nowhere close to the primordial realm, but he did know quite a lot. Chen was surprised by that as well. A spiritual root of heavenly ways could basically create a chaotic prime. Its value would be terrifying. Yun Xian was stunned as well. She thought, did the space ring that Uncle Lai just give me contain a spiritual root of heavenly ways? Even though that was what she thought, Yun Xian did not dare to peer into it. Mo Cheng, you have no need for the spiritual root of heavenly ways with your talent. Why must you fight with us? Yun Daolai roared out with much unwillingness. For the spiritual root of heavenly ways, they had paid a great price. 6 of their 16 god kings had passed away. This was because the spiritual root of heavenly ways was directly connected to their Yun family's future. They were willing to sacrifice their lives for it. Yet now, the appearance of the young man made Yun Daolai feel despair. He knew that the spiritual root of heavenly ways that their 16 god kings had paid a great price for could no longer be taken out. When Yun Daolai called out the young man's name, it immediately caused a great commotion in the divine medicinal garden. What? Mo Cheng? He's Mo Cheng. The supreme overgod ranked first on the Overgods plaque. The supreme overgod ranked first on the Overgods plaque, Mo Cheng, has actually entered the Neptunean divine palace this time as well. That's news enough to shake up the entire place. Cheng is the undebated greatest overgod in the entire Saints world. It's said that the legacy Cheng received is extremely impressive, where his cultivation method is one of the greatest even with the entire Saints world in perspective. Are there still any other overgods who can put up a fight against Cheng in the current Saints world? Cheng is so powerful that he can easily kill early god kings. There's probably no one who can match up to Cheng since he has such great battle prowess. No one can overwhelm him as long as more powerful god kings don't appear. All the god kings stared at Cheng in the divine medicinal garden. There was surprise, envy as well as fear. As for the few overgods present, they all looked at Cheng with deep reverence and admiration. Cheng was the shining star among overgods, enough to illuminate the entire world. His name had already spread across the 49 Great Plains and the 81 Great Planets long ago. That was because he was the most powerful overgod in the entire world. His name stood high up on the overgods' plaques on all the plains and planets. It was dazzling and eye-catching. Chapter 2040. Chen steps forward. Cheng completely ignored the surprised sighs in the surroundings. He also paid no attention to the gazes of envy and admiration. He remained calm and composed, where his heart was as still as a rock, unaffected by the outside world. This was not a result of how developed his mental state was. Instead, it was because he was used to witnessing this wherever he went. Cheng stared at Daolai coldly and said, "I may not need the spiritual root of heavenly ways, but the people around me need it." Daolai stared at Cheng viciously and furiously. He roared out with much unwillingness, "For this spiritual root of heavenly ways, we've paid an extremely hefty price. A total of 6 of the 16 god kings in our clan have died. Are they supposed to just die for nothing?" Cheng's expression did not change. He said coldly, "The strong preying on the weak is the law of survival in this world. Although you discovered the spiritual root of heavenly ways first, you unfortunately don't have the strength to keep it. As a result, all your hard work is useless. You might even become prey. As for me, I am more powerful than you. Whether you become my prey can be decided in a single instance." Cheng acted haughty, completely looking down on Daolai. However, the current him truly did possess that right. Even when Daolai was at his peak condition, Cheng had no need to treat him seriously with his strength. This was because he, Cheng, was the supreme overgod ranked first on the overgod's plaque. His battle prowess was unrivaled, where there was no longer anyone who could match up to him among overgods. Considering how you've already lost quite a few people for the spiritual root of heavenly ways, I'll spare your life if you hand it over willingly. Otherwise, only death awaits you," Cheng said. When he uttered his last sentence, intense killing intent immediately radiated from him. He did not conceal it at all. Everyone in the divine medicinal garden had stopped already. They watched on quietly. Even though the spiritual root of heavenly ways made them green with envy, none of them, including the few late god kings, dared to take part in this. As the overgod ranked first on the overgod's plaque, his background was so great that they could not afford to offend him. Moreover, even though the azure-robed old man behind Cheng kept his presence concealed such that no one could tell his cultivation level, it was exactly this that made him seem unfathomable. "Ha ha ha, even if I die, I won't give you the spiritual root of heavenly ways," Daolai laughed aloud as determination flooded his eyes. A space ring appeared in his hand, and he wanted to use the senses of his soul that he had left in the space ring to blow it up. Cheng's eyes turned cold. With a cold snort, he formed a seal with his left hand before extending a finger towards Daolai. The finger contained mysterious and great power. Daolai only felt his body tighten up, and at that moment, he was completely immobilized, sealed up by a mysterious power. Even though the immobilization only lasted for a short instance, Cheng had already arrived before Daolai. He swung his sword and chopped off Daolai's right hand mercilessly, taking away his space ring. "What is this secret technique?" It can freeze an early god king for a moment when a late overgod uses it. Many of the god kings in the divine medicinal garden were secretly shocked. They looked at Mo Cheng in deep fear. Even though it was just an instance was enough to turn an entire situation around. Yun Daolai grunted in pain as he staggered backwards while clutching his severed arm. His face was pale. To another side, Yun Xian's eyes had reddened. She felt like someone was stabbing at her heart when she saw Mo Cheng cut off Yun Daolai's arm. Yun Xian entered an intense dilemma inside as she clutched the space ring in her hand. She hesitated about whether she should hand over the space ring to save her uncle's life. However, after learning about the effects of the spiritual root of heavenly ways, she also understood just what significance it posed to the Yun family. If the spiritual root of heavenly ways was given to the Great Elder, not only would he be able to raise his cultivation by 1 to 3 heavenly layers in an extremely short amount of time, but it would be extremely likely for him to become a chaotic prime in the future as well. Once the Yun family possessed a chaotic prime, they would immediately become a peak organization of the Sky Empire. They would basically stand on equal ground with the royal family. The spiritual root of heavenly ways held the hopes of the Yun family's rise. Yun Xian carefully sent the senses of her soul into the space ring to confirm whether the spiritual root of heavenly ways was indeed with her or not. The space ring was mostly empty. There was only a root less than 30 centimeters lying at the very center. The power of the world permeated the surroundings as if they contained the truths of the world. Yun Xian confirmed that the root was the spiritual root of heavenly ways the moment she saw that. After hesitating some more, Yun Xian passed the space ring to Chen. She said to him secretly, Chen, I really hope you can help me with something. You've probably guessed it as well. The spiritual root of heavenly ways is indeed in the space ring. I'll give you the spiritual root of heavenly ways right now so that you can immediately leave the Neptunean divine palace with it. Give it to the great elder of the Yun family. From today onwards, you will be the greatest benefactor of our Yun family. We will never mistreat you. Yun Xian was extremely helpless about this decision. She knew that Mo Cheng would find out that she possessed the spiritual root of heavenly ways very soon. She was not confident enough to flee from Mo Cheng, so all she could do was place her hopes on Chen. Even though she knew that this decision harbored the risk of Chen just eating the spiritual root of heavenly resources himself, she was truly out of choices. Even if Chen does eat the spiritual root of heavenly ways, it's better than having it end up in Mo Cheng's hands, Yun Xian sighed inside. Chen was surprised. He turned his head slightly and looked at Yun Xian with quite some astonishment. I won't disclose the fact that the spiritual root of heavenly ways is with you. I'll create a lie that the spiritual root of heavenly ways is with me to distract Mo Cheng so that I can make time for you. However, it won't be too long. Go right now and leave the Neptunean divine palace immediately, Yun Xian added on as determination filled her eyes. If you trick Mo Cheng, he'll never spare you. There'll only be death. Have you considered that properly? Chen responded with a question. Yun Xian gritted her teeth and said with great determination, if my death can forge a brand new future for the Yun family, it won't be in vain. Chen stared at Yun Xian for a long time. Originally, this young lady of the Yun family repulsed him very much, but only at this moment did he truly see her other side. It's not actually here. Mo Cheng's face grew colder, and killing intent shone from his eyes. He tossed the space ring from Yun Daolai onto the ground and said coldly, tell me, where did you hide the spiritual root of heavenly ways? What are you staring for? Go. Yun Xian's face changed, and she immediately urged Chen to go. She knew that she could not keep up this lie for very long. Chen passed the space ring back to Yun Xian and said, they're standing right in front of the entrance, so I can't leave even if I want to. Moreover, do you think Mo Cheng will let anyone leave before he has found the spiritual root of heavenly ways? Although Mo Cheng is still not powerful enough to be taken seriously by a few god kings, the old man beside him is something else. Chen was also unable to see through the azure-robed old man's strength because he hid it just too well. No matter how he looked, all he saw was a regular person. However, Kaya could even see through infinite primes, so the old man was naturally unable to hide anything from her. Kaya had told Chen earlier that the old man in azure was extremely powerful, far more powerful than any god king she had seen before. Fellow Mo Cheng, I saw this person pass a space ring to this woman just then. If I've guessed correctly, the spiritual root of heavenly ways should be in there. At this moment, a god king in the garden clasped his hands before pointing at Yun Xian. Not only was Mo Cheng first on the Overgods plaque, basically guaranteeing him a position on the God King's throne in the future, but his background was also so powerful that many people wished to befriend him. The God King there clearly told him this with these intentions. Yun Xian instantly became sheet white. As for Mo Cheng, he slowly made his way towards Yun Xian. A powerful pressure slowly began to radiate from him. Hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Mo Cheng glared at Yun Xian sharply such that she did not dare to look into his eyes. Yun Xian clenched the space ring in her hand as she was filled with an unwillingness to just give in. After all, this was the chance for their Yun family to rise up. However, she also knew that although she held the spiritual root of heavenly ways right now, she would be unable to keep it in her possession. The chance for the Yun family to rise up will just vanish in my hands. Tears flowed from Yun Xian's eyes uncontrollably. She held on to her space ring, reluctant to part with it, but she was still prepared to hand it over to Mo Cheng in the end. There was nothing else she could do right now. This spiritual root of heavenly ways already belongs to someone, and it's the chance for her clan to rise up. Mo Cheng, it's best if you stop forcing people to do things against their will. At this moment, Chen stood forward and arrived before Yun Xian. He stared at Mo Cheng calmly. Mo Cheng was surprised when he saw Chen block his path. Chen did not hide his presence, so he could clearly sense that Chen was the same as him, a late overgod. He could not remember how long it had been since a late overgod had stood up to him. The overgods and god kings in the garden were all surprised by this sight as they showed disbelief. Who is this brat? He sure is ignorant. Does he think he's a god king, where he can stand up to Mo Cheng? Even god kings are nothing in Mo Cheng's eyes. Didn't you see his battle prowess just then? It's far greater than most early god kings. Surely this wild brat has heard of the Overgods plaque at the very least, right? He's a mere late overgod, yet he still dares to stand up to Mo Cheng. He really is reckless. Discussions rang out in the garden. Many people sneered and scoffed, but there were also some people who looked at Chen with sympathy. Assisting the weak was an admirable action, but he would need the strength to do that at the very least. Chapter 2041, Fighting Mo Cheng. 1. You sure are bold to stand in my way. Mo Cheng stared at Chen coldly and emotionlessly. Kaya became furious from beside Chen when she heard that. Mo Cheng was only a late overgod. His cultivation level was the same as them, yet he was so arrogant, looking down on them. Yun Xian's heart had sunken into despair long ago. Although she knew Chen and Kaya were very powerful and also supreme experts on the Overgods plaque, Mo Cheng's fame was simply too great. Just being ranked first on the Overgods plaque was enough to scare many people. As for Xiao Zheng, he felt uneasy as well. He was an early god king, where both his knowledge and insight were far greater than Yun Xian's. He had clearly witnessed Chen and Kaya's strength when they fought the two early god kings on the 7th floor. Xiao Zheng believed that even if Chen and Kaya were not Mo Cheng's opponent in an open battle, they would still be close. However, behind Mo Cheng was an old man in azure who was completely unknown. It was impossible for Chen's side to benefit as long as the old man was present. As a result, in Xiao Zheng's eyes, offending Mo Cheng was not a very clever decision. There's going to be some trouble now, Xiao Zheng frowned. Chen completely ignored Mo Cheng's coldness. He smiled calmly and said, I made a deal with the Yun family before that I have to protect Miss Yun Xian for a year in the Neptunean Divine Palace. As a result, anyone who wants to harm her must go through me first during this year. Many people in the garden immediately scoffed when they heard Jian Chen's words. They looked at him like he was an idiot. Heh, who's this? He sure is arrogant to say something like this before Mo Cheng. Although Mo Cheng has been a little arrogant, he has the power to back it up. Who's this brat? I've never even heard of him, and from his characteristics, he doesn't seem to be someone ranked in the top 10 of the Overgods plaque, yet he's still bold enough to stand up to Mo Cheng. And he wants to protect other people for a year? He'll struggle to even protect himself after offending Mo Cheng. The azure-robed old man behind Mo Cheng raised his eyebrows at this moment as well. He looked at Jian Chen with some surprise. A gleam of light flashed through Mo Cheng's eyes. Go through you? If you're a slightly more powerful early god king, I would take you seriously, but you're just an ant in my eyes right now. You don't have the right to stand in my way, so back off. With that, Mo Cheng extended a finger, and a strand of sword chi immediately shot out. It flew towards Jian Chen with lightning speed and a sharp light. He was confident that no overgods were his opponent. He did not take Jian Chen seriously either, feeling disinclined to use his sword. This Mo Cheng is worthy of being first on the overgods plaque. Not only is his strength extraordinary, but just a casual sword chi from him is not something regular late overgods can contend with. His comprehension of the laws of the sword is no weaker than mine. He has reached the limits of the partial achievement of sword spirit, where he can reach major achievement with just one more step, thought Jian Chen. He remained calm and composed, and he also extended a finger to send out a strand of sword chi. Swish! The sword chi tore through the air with lightning speed. There was only a flash of silver-white light, and the two strands of sword chi collided together, erupting with a deep bang. I would never have thought this brat uses the laws of the sword as well. So what if he can use the laws of the sword? The same laws in different hands will still possess different power. How can this ignorant kid be Mo Cheng's opponent? Just watch. This clash will show the difference in strength. Many people discussed. None of them thought the outcome would be in Jian Chen's favor. But very soon, the people who looked down on Jian Chen were completely stunned. The two strands of sword chi both collapsed in the air, where neither one managed to get the upper hand. Jian Chen and Mo Cheng were equal in this clash. I couldn't tell, but this kid has got some strength. That means nothing. That was just a very casual strike from Mo Cheng. He did not even use his sword. If Mo Cheng were a little more serious, all he needs is a few moves, no, even just a single move is enough, to defeat his opponent. Mo Cheng's eyes narrowed. He said coldly, "You do have some strength to be able to stop my sword chi so easily. You have the right for me to use my sword." A sword appeared in Mo Cheng's hand, and he became shrouded by a blurry glow. Sword chi churned at the tip of the sword as it radiated with it. A supreme quality saint artifact. Jian Chen looked at the sword in Mo Cheng's hand. The startling rainbow sword he used in the past had already shattered, and he had always been in search of a supreme quality saint artifact that suited him. However, he had yet to find one that satisfied him. Look, Mo Cheng is using his full strength. It's extremely rare to see a battle involving the person ranked first on the Overgods plaque. All the Overgods in the garden paid close attention to the battle, and it even attracted the attention of a few god kings. A gleam of light flashed through Xiao Zheng's eyes. He too was eager for Jian Chen to fight Mo Cheng. He wanted to see just what difference existed between their strength. I will strike out without mercy afterwards. If you want to back off now, it's still not too late. Remember, you can't stop me from getting my hands on the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Mo Cheng said coldly. Are you that certain that I can't stop you? That will only be the case if the person behind you interferes, Jian Chen said calmly. A gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the old man behind Mo Cheng. He looked at Jian Chen with unknown intentions and chuckled, "My little friend, don't worry at all. As long as more powerful god kings don't appear, I naturally won't take part." Speaking of which, I really do hope that you can defeat Cheng so that you can blunt his arrogance a little. With a flash, the old man had already retreated several kilometers away. However, he also knew that finding an overgod who could defeat Cheng was simply far too difficult. Cheng ignored the old man's words. The light in his eyes shone brightly as he churned with battle intent. He said, "Since you're so confident, I'll promise you that I don't want the spiritual root of heavenly ways anymore if you can defeat me." With that, Cheng directly struck out. His sword shone brightly as it seemed to fuse with him, directly stabbing at Chen. Chen took a step forwards to receive it. Sword chi condensed on his right hand as he used it to deal with his opponent. They're fighting. Let's see how long this person can last as Cheng's opponent. Do we even need to look? It'll be under 3 moves. Everyone held their breaths in the garden as they paid close attention. Even some late god kings had become attracted by Cheng personally fighting. Ding! With a crisp sound, the sword chi on Chen's hand struck Cheng's sword. Due to the fact that Chen's sword chi was extremely consolidated, almost to the point where it was solid, there was the ringing of metal. The collision of the two great powers immediately produced a powerful pulse of energy. Sword chi scattered into the surroundings, but they failed to destroy anything around them. All the heavenly resources, or even just the normal vegetation, were protected by powerful formations. Let alone them, even late god kings or supreme god kings from the god king's throne would struggle to damage them. What power! Cheng exclaimed inside. He felt an extremely great power pass through his saint artifact when he clashed with Chen's sword chi. It was to the point where it numbed his entire right arm. However, in the next moment, Cheng's eyes suddenly narrowed. He saw Chen's right hand directly reach for his sword while being coated by a bright light. "You wanna die? I'll take your hand first if that is the case," Cheng sneered inside. Chapter 2042, Fighting Cheng. 2. Cheng's sword glowed brightly, and with a jerk, he directly tried to cut off Chen's sword-wielding arm. However, when he tried to cut off Chen's hand, he only felt like a great clamp had locked down on his sword. He was actually unable to control the supreme quality saint artifact in his hands. That was not all of it. To his shock, he struggled to harm Chen's hand even with his full power. Cheng's eyes immediately narrowed from this. The toughness of Chen's body had shocked him. Chen struck out extremely quickly. He gripped Cheng's sword with his right hand as his left hand suddenly flew out. He formed a sword with his fingers and stabbed towards Cheng with a blur. Swish! Chen moved just too quickly such that many overgods failed to see what had happened. Every single strike of his had surpassed the level of overgods and reached the level of god kings. Only supreme prodigies like Cheng could match up to him as an overgod. However, in just a split second, Chen's finger had arrived before Cheng. Behind, the eyes of the old man who had come along with Cheng immediately shone brightly. He stared at Chen closely, and he felt surprised as well. Cheng's face changed slightly. His calm composure finally became serious. Bellowing out, he no longer held back, unleashing both the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction. The power of the two laws revolved around him as he extended a finger, causing the power of the laws to shoot towards Chen as an arrow. With a boom, the sword chi condensed on Chen's left hand collided with Cheng's laws. Both of the energies ate away at each other as they unleashed a blanket of scattered sword chi into the surroundings, just like resplendent fireworks. Their comprehension of the laws of the sword was at the same level after all. They had both reached the limit of the partial achievement of sword spirit. Both were only a step away from the major achievement of sword spirit. As a result, no one gained the upper hand in a clash of the laws of the sword. However, Cheng had comprehended 2 types of laws. After his laws of the sword had dispersed, his laws of destruction continued onwards without slowing down towards Chen as a black streak of light, bearing a part of Cheng's power from his cultivation with it. Immediately, a destructive presence permeated the surroundings to annihilate everything. The origin energy in the surroundings all fled as the observing overgods all became extremely shocked. Chen's expression remained the same. He clenched his left hand into a fist as chaotic force rampaged through his body. Not only did he push his defenses to the limit, but some of the chaotic force had even emerged from his body, coating his fist as a dark light. It also gave off a presence of destruction. This presence was different from the laws of destruction, as it was even more powerful and violent. If the laws of destruction was a furious beast, then the presence that the chaotic force gave off was an infuriated, bloodthirsty beast that had completely gone berserk. Boom! Chen's fist was thrown like it was unstoppable, dispersing Cheng's laws of destruction in a single stroke before continuing onwards without weakening at all. With a deep thud, it struck Cheng's chest heavily. The power in the fist was extremely great, directly reducing Cheng's clothes to shred. It revealed the armor that Cheng wore inside. At this moment, the armor flickered with light as a layer of energy covered it. It formed various lines of defense to protect Cheng and block the power from Chen's fist. A supreme quality saint artifact. Chen's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the armor and realized that it was also a supreme quality saint artifact. Its defenses were extremely great. Defensive supreme quality saint artifacts were extremely expensive and precious in the saints' world. It was to the point where they completely outmatched offensive supreme quality saint artifacts. Even though Cheng was protected by the armor, so Chen's attack basically failed to injure him completely, Chen still possessed the chaotic body after all. He was so powerful that the great force in the punch still caused Cheng to stagger backwards. Chen's right hand gripped Cheng's sword tightly as he tugged it towards him. Through the sword, he directly brought Cheng's stagger to a halt. Chen charged up, arriving before Cheng with a single step. He continued to swing his bleeding left hand at Cheng. Cheng was stern as energy gathered in his surroundings. The laws of destruction and the laws of the sword both condensed as he took Chen head on. His supreme quality saint artifact had been clamped down by Chen's right hand, so it was unable to break free straight away. Cheng could only face Chen's close attacks reluctantly. Bang! 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 With several deep thuds, Chen alternated between punches and palm strikes, clashing with Cheng time and time again. Even though Cheng possessed two different laws, Chen was still able to suppress him with the advantages of the chaotic body. Chen moved extremely quickly, dealing punch after punch, palm strike after palm strike. He used his own laws of the sword to nullify Cheng's laws of the sword, while he used his chaotic body and chaotic force to stop Cheng's laws of destruction and the power of his cultivation. He was able to gain the upper hand with each attack, landing several strikes on Cheng. However, Cheng possessed a supreme quality saint artifact, so he remained uninjured despite Chen's attacks. On the other hand, both Chen's left and right hands had become bloodied. After all, he was still made out of flesh and blood. Even though the chaotic body was very powerful, he was still unable to remain unscathed against Cheng's attacks. Many overgods struggled to see Chen and Cheng's battle clearly in the divine medicinal garden. Even with the senses of their soul, they were only able to capture that Cheng was unscathed, while Chen's hands were injured. However, the god kings were able to see everything clearly. This outcome astounded all of them, and it left them stunned on the spot. They struggled to accept it. Cheng was the supreme overgod ranked first on the Overgods plaque. His name was renowned throughout the saints' world, and he was so powerful that he was the undisputed most powerful among all the overgods across the entire saints' world. However, Cheng, who was publicly acknowledged as the most powerful, had actually been suppressed by someone with the same cultivation, a nameless overgod. This shocked everyone present. These god kings all understood that Cheng only remained unharmed because he possessed a defensive supreme quality saint artifact, not because of his own power. Cheng possessed both offensive and defensive supreme quality saint artifacts such that both his attacks and defenses were the greatest that they could be. However, his opponent, the nameless Overgod, had yet to use a single saint artifact at all. Who is this Overgod? Where did he come from? Everyone was extremely shocked. Many of them tried to guess Chen's identity. His battle prowess was so great that it caused intense shock to all the god kings. Cheng was able to kill regular early god kings as a late Overgod, which was astonishing enough, making him renowned across the saints' world. However, they now discovered an Overgod who was even more powerful than Cheng. Arg! Cheng bellowed out as his presence erupted, surging right into the sky. At this moment, he felt extremely furious. Even though he had clashed with Chen several times now, he was completely suppressed. If it were not for his supreme quality saint artifact, his injuries would be far worse than Chen's. He struggled to accept an outcome like this. The laws of destruction and the laws of the sword condensed at the same time. Cheng erupted with all his power, gathering it in his left hand to strike the sword that Chen had clamped down on. After Cheng struck the sword, it immediately produced a clear thrum and vibrated intensely. All the force in Cheng's left hand poured into the sword, immediately causing it to erupt with light. It exploded with extremely great force, where both the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction were present. Chen frowned. Chaotic force surged within the right hand, which he used to clamp down on the sword as well. However, the power that Cheng had erupted within the sword was just too powerful. As sword chi surged, the sword directly broke free from Chen's grasp. Chen's right hand had become red with blood now. That was the chaotic blood of his chaotic body. After all, he had held onto a supreme quality saint artifact. The saint artifact itself already possessed extraordinary might, and now that it was in the hands of Cheng, the supreme Overgod ranked first on the Overgods plaque, even his chaotic body would be injured. Cheng regained control over his sword as his presence climbed. His vitality was pushed to his utmost limit, making it flash shockingly. A powerful sword intent revolved around him. You are indeed enough to be my opponent. You have the right for me to use my full strength, Cheng said coldly. He was emotionless and cold. He had completely lost the upper hand in the clash before. Chen had locked down his sword, forcing him into a close-range battle. He struggled to accept this. As a result, he made up his mind that he had to redeem himself in the next part of the battle, where he would defeat his opponent in an overwhelming manner. Mind and soul as one, vitality sword chi. Cheng called out. His presence surged as his hair fluttered. His sword shone like a sun, becoming extremely resplendent and dyeing the entire garden snow-white. As he suddenly swung out, a huge strand of sword chi immediately formed, turning into a silver-white stream. It carried the power of Cheng's vitality as it cleaved towards Chen suddenly. The stream of energy was like a torrent, moving rapidly through the air at extreme speeds. Many early god kings in the garden were secretly astounded. Cheng's strike made many of them feel life-threatening danger. Over half of the early god kings gathered here had no confidence in being able to stop this attack. Daluo sword. However, Chen remained completely calm. He formed a seal with his hand, and a golden strand of sword chi condensed in an instant. He gripped the sword chi and directly stabbed out with it. Chen's mind seemed to fuse with the sword chi as he struck out. At that moment, Chen felt like his soul was part of the sword chi. In that instance, something flashed through Chen's head. Vaguely, he seemed to grasp something. It was a hazy understanding. However, it was still not enough in the end. It was very hazy, disappearing with a single flash, so he failed to truly comprehend it. Boom! The Daluo sword chi shone with golden resplendence as its presence was shocking. It collided with Cheng's vitality sword chi. The sword chi that contained a part of Cheng's vitality actually failed to match up to the Daluo sword chi, dispersing from the attack. Impossible. This is impossible. Cheng's face was filled with disbelief. The Vitality Sword Chi was a very impressive battle skill, yet it was still unable to fend off the Golden Sword Chi. He found this difficult to accept. Before Cheng could respond, the Golden Sword Chi that had dulled shot off as a streak of light under Chen's control towards him. With a boom, powerful energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings, and Cheng was blown far away. The Supreme Quality Saint artifact on him flickered as it protected him. Chen's attack did not stop there. It was as intense as a torrential storm as he formed another hand seal and condensed another strand of Golden Sword Chi. He pursued Cheng as his presence surged with battle intent, making him seem invincible. All the God Kings present were stupefied as their hearts churned. They were very perturbed. Their opinions of Chen had undergone an overwhelming change. Even Xiao Zheng and Yun Xian, who had witnessed Chen fight before, were shocked right now. The strength he had displayed rendered them speechless. Only Kaiya and Master Chanlong, who understood Chen's strength extremely well, remained composed. Heaven and man as one, heaven-splitting sword Chi. Cheng was grim. He knew that his current opponent was unprecedentedly powerful, so he immediately formed a seal with his hand to use another battle skill, sending out a second strand of sword Chi. The heaven-splitting sword Chi was even more powerful than the Vitality Sword Chi. It tore through the air with extremely shocking power, causing the surroundings to surge. It truly possessed the power to split the heaven and earth. Chen did not try to dodge the attack at all. He filled his body with chaotic force as he used his body to receive it. Spurt. The heaven-splitting sword Chi punched through Chen's chest. Under the ravaging of the sword Chi, all of Chen's organs were ground to pieces. However, Chen's expression remained the same. His gaze was extremely sharp as he charged over with the golden sword Chi condensed on his right hand. He arrived before Cheng in a single instance, and he stabbed him with the Daluo sword Chi as it shone resplendently. With a great, deafening boom, all the force in the Daluo sword Chi struck Cheng. Chen accepted injuries to injure his opponent. He paid the price of wounding himself to unleash all the power of the Daluo sword on Cheng. The might of the golden sword Chi was truly very shocking. Its power had rapidly grown as Chen's strength constantly increased. Even with the Supreme Quality Saint artifact, Cheng was unable to emerge unscathed after taking on the shockingly powerful Daluo sword. A bloody mist spurted from his mouth as he was launched far away like a broken kite. Meanwhile, Chen circulated his chaotic force. His blood on his chest seemed to be attracted by something, actually all flowing back into his wounds. Under the extreme regeneration of the chaotic body, he rapidly recovered from his wounds. Cheng struck a rock behind him heavily, creating a great bang. Everything in the surroundings was protected by formations, so the rock was undamaged. On the other hand, Cheng had been reduced to a sorry shape. Arg! Cheng stood there disheveled as he roared out furiously with blood running from the corner of his lips. The laws of the sword and the laws of destruction revolved around him, giving off a presence that made the hearts of many early god kings shiver. His sword danced slowly before him with the truths of the universe. Laws of the sword and laws of destruction rapidly condensed. Clearly, he was casting an extremely powerful battle skill. Chen's eyes were cold, and his presence was prominent. Even though his clothes had already been dyed red with blood, he stood there like an undefeatable god of war. He seemed invincible. He formed a seal with his hand, and his presence suddenly changed. Sword Chi condensed around him as he seemed to turn into a sword. He charged at Cheng like he was unstoppable. Tai sword technique. From afar, Chen seemed to be surrounded by blinding light. As a result, he seemed just like a gigantic sword right now. He shot over with lightning speed. With a flash, Chen had arrived before Cheng. The senses of many people had failed to capture him properly. He was quick. He was far too quick. Let alone Overgods, even a few early god kings would not have been able to react to such speed, not to mention putting up a defense. Bang! Cheng did not have the time to use his battle skill at all. As a sword, Chen stabbed him with terrifying force. Chen's sword technique was just too shocking. It was far greater than the simple attacks with the laws of the sword from before. Even with a supreme quality saint artifact that blocked most of the attack, Cheng still ended up vomiting blood constantly. He was extremely pale as he was blown away powerlessly, striking the ground heavily. This time, Cheng could no longer struggle to his feet. He was extremely heavily injured, where he would be dead already if it were not for his supreme quality saint artifact. The entire divine medicinal garden was deathly silent. Everyone looked at Chen with mixed feelings, or they looked at Cheng in disbelief. All of this was like a blow to their minds. Cheng was first on the Overgods plaque, making him the most powerful overgod in the saints' world. However, he had just been defeated by a nobody with similar cultivation who had suddenly appeared. This was just impossible to accept. Cheng coughed up blood as he struggled up to his feet by using his sword as support. He looked at Chen with extremely mixed feelings and asked, "Just who are you?" Chen said. He also looked at Cheng with some admiration. This was admiration for Cheng's strength. He was a late overgod, yet he still managed to cause Chen quite a lot of injury. Just that alone had earned Chen's respect. He was truly worthy of being number one on the Overgods plaque. After all, even though Chen had not broken through during his time in outer space, his strength was still greater than it was in the past. Even regular early god kings were unable to injure him, but Cheng had managed to do so. Chen. Cheng murmured before asking, "Why have I never heard of your name? I haven't seen you on the Overgods plaque either. I've never attempted the Overgods plaque, so my name obviously won't appear there." Chen continued, "Moreover, the saints' world is a place where the strong prey on the weak. So what if you're first on the Overgods plaque? You're still done for when you come across more powerful god kings. Even the people who rank first on the god king's throne are only able to claim supremacy among god kings. Against powerful primordial realm experts, they'll still be reduced to nothing. It's my defeat." Cheng became rather dejected. Clearly, this defeat had affected him greatly. The old man in azure appeared behind Cheng and took out a healing pill for Cheng to consume. He said, "Cheng, do you understand now? The saints' world is so vast that who knows how many impossibly powerful deviants it has given birth to. You need to understand the concept that there will always be someone better than you. Being first on the Overgods plaque doesn't actually make you the strongest overgod, nor does being first on the God King's throne make you the strongest God King. That's because in the saints' world, there are many overgods and God Kings who don't care about these rankings at all. They have no desire for fame and only focus on cultivation so that they can reach the very apex." The old man in azure robes spoke firmly. His every single word was like a great bell, ringing through Cheng's head. Cheng remained silent. This was not the first time he had heard these words. The old man had told him this several times already. However, Cheng was just far too impressive. The talent he showed since young both for cultivation and comprehension made him a supreme prodigy, where he could shake up the saints' world. Coupled with a powerful legacy and an incredible cultivation method, it had been smooth sailing for him the entire way. He struggled to find an opponent at the same level as him, so as time went on, he developed an arrogance of being invincible. It was to the point where he looked down on all people. As a result, he never took the old man's words to heart. He believed that there was no longer any person who could defeat him with the same cultivation. No one on the Overgods plaque could, and it was even more impossible for those nameless Overgods. However, after the battle he had experienced with Chen, he truly understood this concept. Being first on the Overgods plaque was not truly being first, while being first on the God King's throne did not truly mean invincibility among God Kings. That was because not all supreme prodigies attempted the Overgods plaque or the God King's throne. But there's no need for you to be so depressed either. With your current battle prowess, you are basically at the apex among Overgods. Across the entire saints' world, there is basically no one who can match up to you. Even some disciples of grand exalts won't be as great as you, comforted the old man in azure robes. He was afraid that the talented Mo Cheng would be unable to take this shock and would end up ruined. However, Mo Cheng was no ordinary person. He calmed down very soon, and his face brightened up once again. He looked at Jian Chen with shining eyes and said coldly, "Jian Chen, I will remember your name. I am indeed not your opponent as an overgod, but once I become a god king, I will challenge you again." Jian Chen said calmly, "If you can find me after you become a god king, fighting again is no problem at all." Mo Cheng slowly raised his hand. There was a droplet of Jian Chen's blood in there. He took out a jade bottle and stored the droplet of blood away. He said, "Finding you won't be difficult." From that, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. He stared at the droplet of blood Mo Cheng had stowed away as a light flickered through his eyes. He could already tell that Mo Cheng would be able to find him in the vast saint's world from just that droplet of blood. Mo Cheng and the azure-robed old man left the divine medicinal garden. Mo Cheng did not mention the spiritual root of heavenly ways at all after the battle. In the blink of an eye, the garden became peaceful once again. Everyone stared at Jian Chen, who stood where he had fought Mo Cheng, as they showed admiration and deep fear in their eyes. They had personally witnessed Jian Chen's strength. There were no early god kings in the divine medicinal garden who were confident about stopping Jian Chen's attacks. Yin Daolai had become completely stunned. He stared at Jian Chen blankly without returning to his senses for quite some time. Only now did he understand just how great of a deviant the Jian Chen that had come in with them was. Even the person who held first place on the Overgods plaque had been defeated by him. In particular, Yin Daolai's heart trembled when he saw them fight. The might from the battle between the two Overgods was just too powerful, to the point where he trembled. Yun Xian held the space ring with the spiritual root of heavenly ways as she struggled to calm down. However, a person silently approached Yun Xian at this moment. Greed filled his eyes as he directly snatched at Yun Xian's space ring. This person had moved just too quickly. Moreover, he was completely silent like a ghost, such that many god kings present failed to realize his intentions as well. It was even more impossible for Yun Xian to react. Jian Chen's eyes turned cold. He suddenly looked at the figure, and his presence exploded. He radiated with sword chi as he used the Daluo sword. A golden strand of sword chi shot over with lightning speed. He. Jian Chen, you can claim that you're invincible among overgods, but you're nothing at all compared to Godings right now, sneered the figure. He blocked Jian Chen's sword chi with a wave of his hand as he continued to reach towards Yun Xian's space ring. The spiritual root of heavenly ways is mine. The person was extremely ecstatic. He really would not be bold enough to take the spiritual root of heavenly ways away from Mo Cheng because of the unfathomable old man behind him. However, he had nothing to fear if it were Yun Xian or Jian Chen. Late God King. Jian Chen's heart shivered as he became extremely grim. To him right now, a late God King was definitely an extremely powerful opponent. The power of the laws of destruction suddenly appeared just when the late God King was about to take the space ring from Yun Xian. Kaya, who had remained beside Yun Xian, struck out. She wielded the laws of destruction in one hand while wielding the laws of fire in the other. The two laws combined in her hands, forming a profound inscription of the universe. It suddenly shot out, striking the hand of the God King that reached towards the space ring. With a bang, terrifying energy splayed out. Yun Xian, who was the closest to all of it, paled and immediately staggered backwards. A set of silver-white armor appeared on her, blocking most of the energy. It was a high-quality saint artifact. Although it could not be compared to supreme-quality saint artifacts, it was more than enough to block the energy. Kaya staggered backwards as well. She completely paled in comparison in both cultivation and comprehension. Even though she was no weaker than Jian Chen, she was unable to put up a fight against a late God King. However, her attack this time had forced back the late God King's hand as well. The God King was surprised. He glanced at Kaya before snorting coldly. He did not freeze up and took a step out, appearing before Yan Xian again in a split second. He reached towards the space ring again. Oh no, he wants to take the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Stop him. Don't let him take it. The many god kings in the garden returned to their senses, and they immediately cried out. They charged over as quickly as they could. Burning desire filled all of their eyes. They were all greedy. Clearly, they were not interested in helping Yan Xian protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways. They all wanted to take it for themselves. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was nothing particularly important to a supreme prodigy with a great background like Cheng, but it was extremely tempting to the god kings in the garden. A spiritual root of heavenly ways could create a chaotic prime. That was more than enough for them to lose all rationality and fight for the treasure regardless of consequences. Don't. Yin Daolai called out painfully. Despair filled his face. They had just managed to keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways away from Cheng, yet they drew over even more god kings. The world seemed gloomy now. After all, not only were there many god kings in the garden, but there were late god kings as well. No matter how impressive Jian Chen's battle prowess was, it was unable to make up for so many god kings. Jian Chen's gaze was cold as he radiated with killing intent. With a thought, he used a strand of profound sword chi without hesitating at all. The profound sword chi was dazzling. It pierced through space and overcame time, shooting out with an unbelievable speed. In just a single instance, it arrived before the forehead of the late god king before piercing right into his head. It was fast, just far too fast. The late god king struggled to react to the profound sword chi. It had already punched through his forehead and struck his soul. Arg! The god king immediately produced a painful cry as his soul was unimaginably damaged. His consciousness blurred as he bled from the 7 orifices on his head. Kaya had already arrived before the god king silently. Her presence surged as her eyes were cold. Just like before, wielding a different law in each hand, she struck out with her full power mercilessly. She caused the late god king to cough up blood violently. With an injured soul, the late god king's consciousness blurred. Whether it was his external senses or his defenses, they had all been lowered to an absolute minimum. He basically could not fight back at all while his soul still had not stabilized. Swish! A golden strand of sword chi shot through the air. The Daluo sword Jian Chen used had arrived before the god king. It directly beheaded the god king before being followed by a flash. The sword chi shot into the sky and stabbed the head. Bang! The head exploded in the air. From the golden sword chi, the weakened soul of the late god king had been ripped to pieces. All the god kings in the garden witnessed Jian Chen and Kaya kill a late god king with lightning speed. It made their faces change, and they could not help but come to a halt as they looked at the two of them uneasily. However, their hesitation only lasted for a split second before being replaced by their avarice. They quickly approached Yan Xian. The temptation of the spiritual root of heavenly ways was just too great. Very few of them were able to keep their calm. Most of them had lost their rationality altogether. Jian Chen and Kaya became extremely stern. Against so many god kings, even the two of them felt powerless, where they would not be able to escape. There were plenty of late god kings among them. Even if they did manage to make it out of here, they would not be able to escape from their pursuit. Even hiding in the Inata Tower would not work. The Inata Tower was extremely tough, but the speed that Jian Chen was able to unleash with it was nowhere as fast as late god kings. After all, the space in the Neptunean Divine Palace was safe, unlike spatial cracks that were filled with danger, where even infinite primes had to be careful. As a result, Jian Chen was able to fend off infinite primes with the Inata Tower and spatial cracks, but out here, he had lost that ability. My formation is almost complete. Make some time for me. Just a few seconds is enough, Master Chanlong said secretly. He had already cast down a defensive formation nearby when Jian Chen fought Cheng. Clearly, he had expected them to encounter something like this. If there's really nothing we can do, I'll hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Yun Xian said with a pale face. We managed to keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways through a battle against Cheng. How can we just let them have it so easily? Jian snorted coldly. With a thought, the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was immediately activated, and he unleashed a howl. Immediately, a deafening howl rang out from Jian Chen's mouth. The terrifying sound wave formed a visible ripple as it swept out in all directions, engulfing the entire garden. Right now, Jian Chen was like an ancient Skywolf. His howl expanded with a terrifying pressure. The power of the bloodline within him was completely drained in that instance. The God Kings who originally charged over seemed to lose all their strength at that moment. They flopped over powerlessly and crashed onto the ground. The inertia, however, caused them to skid quite a long distance. Many of them somersaulted a few times before coming to a halt. Their eyes were hollow as if they had lost their souls, while their clothes were all tattered, revealing the armor that they wore inside. Even the more powerful late God Kings who managed to control themselves and not fall over also entered such a state. Their souls were stunned. The bodies of some weaker Overgods had been torn to pieces by the shockwave while their souls had directly dispersed. Aside from them, even Yun Xian, Yun Daolai, and Xiao Zheng were the same. They were stunned as they stood where they were. Only Kaya and Master Chanlong were unaffected. Kaya charged out as quickly as she could. She used the laws of fire and destruction together and struck out with her full strength to kill the late God Kings. Jian Chen followed Kaya closely. While all the God Kings remained stunned, he wanted to strike like lightning and kill some God Kings. Not everyone among all the God Kings wore defensive saint artifacts. Quite a few people did not wear anything defensive at all, which made dealing with them much easier. In a short breath, Jian Chen and Kaya both destroyed the heads of a late God King each, wiping out their souls. The threat that the late God Kings posed to them in the garden was particularly great. Once Chanlong's formation was complete, the damage that the late God Kings could cause would be far greater than the early or mid God Kings. As a result, they only needed to deal with the late God Kings right now. However, just when they were about to kill a second late God King each, all the late God Kings in the garden actually returned to their senses. The two late God Kings Jian Chen and Kaya attacked roared out furiously. They blocked the life-threatening attacks and began to engage in an intense battle. Afterwards, the God Kings in the garden all began to return to their senses one by one. When they realized that they had been stunned temporarily earlier, and two late God Kings had already been slain by Jian Chen and Kaya, they all felt angst. Jian Chen's heart shivered. These people had recovered far faster than he had originally imagined. He understood that the threat and effects of the howl from the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf on cultivators were not as great as on space beasts. Bang! With that sound, Jian Chen's waist was struck by a late God King, and he was launched far away by the great force. Even Kaya was injured, where her body was bloodied. Even more God Kings charged towards Yun Xian. Jian Chen borrowed the force to arrive before Yun Xian. After tossing her to Master Chanlong, he bellowed out and blocked the God Kings with great battle intent. He engaged in an intense fight against them. Kaya also fought and retreated. She struck out without holding back, all, using the laws of fire, destruction, and creation simultaneously to erupt with terrifying power. She fought against all the God Kings. In just 10 seconds, Jian Chen was completely bloodied. There were wounds of various sizes littered across his body, making for a brutal and terrifying sight. He had used all his trump cards aside from the Inata Tower. He had even used his last strand of profound sword chi. It was all because of his chaotic body that he could last until now. At this moment, a sliver of understanding suddenly appeared in Jian Chen's head. At that moment, he grasped the thought tightly, and in the next moment, an even more powerful sword intent began to radiate from his body. It was as tremendous as an ocean. Jian Chen bellowed out as the sword chi around him became several times more powerful. Without even forming a seal with his hand, he used the Daluo sword with his thoughts alone. Not only did the current Daluo sword condense countless times more quickly than in the past, almost instantaneously, but even its power had reached a whole new level. At this moment, Chen had finally made a breakthrough with the laws of the sword, reaching the major achievement of sword spirit. The major achievement of sword spirit meant that Chen's comprehension of the laws of the sword had reached the level of god kings. However, his chaotic body still remained at the level of overgods. As a result, his breakthrough at this moment clearly was not enough for Chen to deal with the threat he currently faced. Chen's wounds became heavier and heavier, where he was completely soaked in blood. He had so many wounds that it was a shocking sight. Each wound was terrifyingly vicious, revealing the white bone inside. However, Chen did not weaken at all despite his heavy wounds. His battle prowess was still extremely great, like an undying god of war, engaging in an intense slaughter against many god kings. God kings had already died to Chen's hands. They were all early god kings. These people either had their heads pierced by Chen's sword chi or shattered by his palm strikes. One of the early god kings had even been forcefully ripped in half by Chen. It was an extremely shocking sight. Kaya was also heavily injured. She was covered in blood as she used the laws of creation, destruction, and fire together. She fended off many god kings. All the god kings in the divine medicinal garden were astonished. Their gazes at Chen and Kaya were filled with shock and fear. Two overgods were actually able to last so long against an encirclement of god kings, and they even claimed the lives of a few early god kings. All of them felt fear towards such powerful overgods. Specks of red light flickered in Chen's pupils, and vaguely, an evil presence seemed to slowly awaken within him. Not only was he heavily injured right now, but more than half of the power of his soul had been drained by the two strands of profound sword chi as well. Coupled with the heavy smell of blood around, he struggled to suppress the evil power that had fused with his soul. Across the years, his strength had completely exceeded the evil powers, as he grew just too quickly. As a result, the evil power was unable to affect his consciousness at all even when he was heavily injured in the past. However, when he absorbed that droplet of power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline before, the evil power had benefited far more than he had, allowing it to strengthen drastically. He struggled to keep it at bay now that he was facing this situation. Master, the sword spirits immediately sensed Chen's condition, and their voices rang through Chen's soul like huge chimes. In the past, when Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong roamed through outer space, Chen had been heavily injured several times with the power of his soul greatly drained. He also struggled to keep the evil power suppressed at such times, and it was always the sword spirits that got him to his senses as quickly as possible, preventing him from completely losing consciousness. Chen did his best to remain conscious as he fended off the attacks in the surroundings. He was constantly being wounded. Many stab wounds appeared, which had reduced his organs to pieces long ago. He completely relied on the chaotic body to keep going. A mere overgod wants to keep a spiritual root of heavenly ways all to herself? You're dreaming. At this moment, a sneer rang out from beside Yunexian. As Yunexian paled in fright, a hand extended out from the space before her, snatching away the space rings in her hands. Not only did he take away the space ring that held the spiritual root of heavenly ways, but he had also taken away the space ring that Yunexian wore on her finger. He was clearly a late god king, having made his way around Chen and Kaya to approach Yunexian. You bastard, leave the space ring behind, don't let him leave here. Another few god kings approached Yunexian from behind. They had also made their way around Chen and Kaya, approaching Yunexian silently from the other side. They were just about to steal the space ring as well. However, when they saw the space ring being taken away by someone else first, they were immediately enraged. Their gazes immediately shifted to the god king hidden in space, and they struck out without hesitation. They shook up the space with powerful energy, forcing out the person hidden in there. The god king with the space ring laughed aloud. He did not try to fight with anyone. Instead, he disappeared into space once again as he immediately wanted to leave. Rise. At this moment, Master Chanlong's formation was finally completed. After calling out, the formation finally rose up, and with a powerful pulse of energy, a hemisphere of energy instantly condensed, enveloping a radius of 50 meters. Apart from Chanlong, Yun Xian, and Xiao Zheng, a few of the God Kings had made their way around in the formation as well. As they were too close, they were enveloped by it as well. Bang! With a thud, the fleeing God King with the space ring slammed into the energy barrier. The energy barrier was completely fine, but he fell out of the space there. He cursed secretly before immediately attacking the barrier in a hurry. Get in the formation. Master Chanlong ignored the unwelcomed guests in his formation as he called out to Jian, Chen and Kaya. Jian Chen let out a roar at the sky as his eyes exploded with light. He suppressed the awakening evil power as much as he could before instantly sending out a few strands of Daluo sword qi. Afterwards, he approached the energy barrier as quickly as he could before completely melding into it. He entered without any obstructions. Kaya entered the energy barrier at basically the same time as Jian Chen. Many God Kings charged over from behind them. However, they failed to repeat what Jian Chen and Kaya had just done. They were unable to pass through the energy barrier, having all been blocked outside. God damn it, get through this formation. The God Kings all attacked the energy barrier from the outside, causing it to tremble. Master Chanlong was grim. He took out a large number of divine crystals from his space ring and poured them into the formation. He said gruffly, "Hurry up and deal with the people in the formation if you want to stabilize it. I'll control it to assist you." Jian Chen and Kaya did not hesitate. They immediately charged towards the God Kings who had intruded on the energy barrier. Xiao Zheng took part as well, charging towards a mid-God King. Under Master Chanlong's control, the barrier created strands of white energy that wrapped around the God Kings. At the same time, it would produce streams of energy from time to pierce their bodies. Not only could the formation defend, but it could also attack. The God Kings who had entered the formation all died to Jian Chen and Kaya's hands after being restricted by the formation. Even late God Kings passed away. Outside the energy barrier, all the God Kings stood around it as they unleashed violent attacks at it. Even though the barrier was very powerful, it continued to shake from the combined efforts of so many God Kings. It almost collapsed several times before being stabilized by Master Chanlong. The energy is being consumed too rapidly. "Quick, give me divine crystals," Master Chanlong called out. After becoming a God King, his formations had reached a new level as well, but it was still very difficult for him to stop the attacks of so many God Kings with a formation he had cast down in a hurry. Jian Chen ignored his injuries and immediately took out 10 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystal, which he gave to Master Chanlong. He placed all of them into the crucial point. With the support of 10 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystal, the tremoring immediately decreased slightly. However, it still distorted from all the attacks. Jian Chen frowned. He discovered that the 10 blocks of divine crystal were being consumed extremely quickly. As soon as it had been placed in, the energy in one of the blocks decreased significantly. At this speed, the 10 blocks would not be able to last for very long. He no longer had a lot of divine crystals left in his space ring. He had already spent over half of the supreme-grade divine crystals he had obtained from Yashi Lian, so he only had a little over a dozen blocks left. Jian Chen frowned. With a flip of his hand, a few more space rings appeared in his hand, and he sent in the senses of his soul to check inside. These space rings belonged to the God Kings who had entered the barrier. Jian Chen and Kaya naturally did not miss their space rings after they had been slain. Indeed, Jian Chen discovered quite a few divine crystals in the space rings. He immediately took out all of them. But to his pity, the God Kings they had slain were not particularly wealthy even though there were late God Kings among them. In total, there was only a little over a dozen blocks. "It's a pity that I failed to get all the space rings of the early God Kings I killed, allowing others to benefit for nothing," thought Jian Chen. When he faced the slaughter of so many god kings, he had no spare energy to collect the space rings. Over 30 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystals should be enough to last for a while. However, we won't be able to last for very long with just this formation. Chen, keep watch over the formation. I'll go cast down more, Master Chanlong growled and immediately got to work. Kaya, you go heal up first. Leave the matters here to me for now. There might be a horrific battle afterwards. Chen gave Kaya his best healing pills. He could not help but feel deeply ashamed from how Kaya was covered in blood. Sigh, it's all because of the decision I made without asking you all that made you end up like this. Kaya, I can't make it up to you, Chen blamed himself. Originally, he could have taken another choice. As long as he gave up the spiritual root of heavenly ways, they would not have become a public target. However, they had managed to retain the spiritual root of heavenly ways after a battle against Cheng. He had almost become its owner, so he was truly unwilling to give it up and make all his efforts go to waste. Kaya smiled gently. She showed no blame at all on her pale face. Instead, she was slightly happy. She said, Chen, I discovered that my strength increases extremely rapidly through fights like that. Kaya continued, when I cultivated before, I didn't encounter a single bottleneck at all, allowing me to break through extremely quickly. I cultivated to late Overgod in a single breath, but ever since I reached late Overgod, I felt like I had reached a bottleneck. My comprehensions of laws no longer advanced, forcing me to halt there. Kaya's eyes were bright. She looked at the god kings who constantly attacked the energy barrier, and she said, but when I fought against them earlier, I could clearly sense that the bottleneck that caught me seemed to be slowly loosening. I can even vaguely see the cornerstone of God King. I shouldn't be far away from breaking through. That's fantastic. My comprehension of the laws of the sword has already reached the level of God Kings. As long as I have some time, I can raise my cultivation to God King as well. At that time, there really won't be a lot of people who'll be able to pose a threat to us with our battle prowess, Chen said excitedly. Then, he added, however, the matter at hand is to make it through this danger first. Chen also looked beyond the barrier of energy. He had already prepared the resources for his breakthrough, and now that his laws of the sword had broken through, he only needed some time, and his chaotic body could reach the 12th layer. However, it clearly was not a good time to break through right now since the barrier of energy could shatter at any time. Xian looked at the space ring in her hand with much attachment. The space ring that contained the spiritual root of heavenly ways had been taken away. After the God King was slain by Chen, the space ring returned to her hands. Chen, I'll give this spiritual root of heavenly ways to you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to keep it at all. It would have entered the hands of other people long ago. Our Yun family no longer possesses the right to keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Xian passed the space ring to Chen slowly. She was dejected as she said gently, if you really can't stop them, then hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Yeah, Miss Xian's right. Chen, if we really can't stop them, then just hand over the root. Xiaozheng looked at Chen with mixed feelings as amazement filled his eyes. He said, Chen. Kaya and your talent are basically unprecedented. I think even some grand exalts would be willing to fight over you to take you in as disciples. They would be willing to nurture the two of you with everything they have. Various heavenly resources and god-tier pills will be presented on your whim. It really isn't worth it to force yourselves into desperate straits over a single spiritual root of heavenly ways. Chen looked at Xian quietly. He hesitated slightly before accepting the space ring decisively. Then, he looked at the people outside the barrier of energy as the light in his eyes flickered. At the same time, a group of people shot towards the divine medicinal garden with lightning speed from several hundred kilometers away. They moved extremely quickly, crossing several kilometers in a single instance. There were roughly 50 people in the group. The person at the front was a handsome young man in violet soft armor. He seemed to be in his 20s, and he possessed an arrogant air. His violet armor was actually a precious supreme quality saint artifact. It flickered with light as it gave off powerful pulses of energy. No one was weaker than early God King in this group. In reality, there were only a few early God Kings and not a lot of mid-God Kings either. Most of them were late God Kings. With so many late God Kings banded together, they were quite a powerful force in the Neptunean divine palace. However, all of them seemed to be following the young man in violet armor. Most of them looked at the young man politely, and they spoke submissively. Fifth Prince, it's right ahead. According to the soul imprint we left on Dao Lai, he seems to be several hundred kilometers away, Yun Weifeng said from behind the young man. Right now, his face was pale, and he seemed haggard. His clothes were also red with blood. Alongside Yun Weifeng were the 8 other God Kings of the Yun family, including Yun Lianqing. All of them suffered from injuries of various degrees. A gleam of light flickered through the 5th Prince's eyes as he showed some excitement. He said, "Good. Let's speed up. We need to get there as quickly as possible. We can't let anything happen to the spiritual root of heavenly ways." The 5th Prince's eyes were filled with a burning desire as his heart beat heavily. His blood seemed to be raging through his veins. It was a spiritual root of heavenly ways, something that could create a chaotic prime. If an item like that was released into the outside world, it would be enough to cause a fight between the chaotic primes of various eternal empires and ancient clans. This was because the spiritual root of heavenly ways would guarantee a chaotic prime for the clan. This was a huge temptation to any eternal empire or ancient clan. It was enough to affect their futures. Your Yun family has played a vital role this time by providing such important information. Don't worry. As long as I obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways successfully, I definitely won't mistreat your Yun family, the 5th Prince of the Sky Empire from the profound Thunder Plain promised to the people of the Yun family. When Dao Lai separated from us, an Overgod was pursuing him. The Overgod was the person who ranked first on the Overgods plaque, Mo Cheng. Although I haven't seen Mo Cheng fight, so I don't know how powerful he is the supreme Overgod who ranks first after all. Dao Lai probably isn't his opponent. Your Highness, to ensure that the spiritual root of heavenly ways does not get taken away, we should continue to speed up, said Yun Lianqing. His pale face was filled with deep bitterness and helplessness. Aside from him, all the God Kings from the Yun family in the group also displayed great unwillingness and dejection. They had discovered the spiritual root of heavenly ways first, but when they harvested it, other God Kings discovered it. The God Kings were only in a small group. Although they were not as powerful as the other party, they were not much weaker either. As a result, the 16 God Kings of the Yun family engaged in a battle to the death against their opponents to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Their Yun family had paid a heavy price in the battle. It cost them the lives of 6 God Kings. However, as the battle erupted, the disturbance they caused attracted even more God Kings. As a result, the God Kings of the Yun family gave the spiritual root of heavenly ways to Yun Dao Lai in order to keep it. He got him to leave the Neptunean divine palace immediately with the root, while the rest of them remained behind to stop their opponents. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was just too important to their Yun family. It was an important treasure that could make their Yun family become a peak clan in the Sky Empire. In order to protect the spiritual root of heavenly ways, the God Kings of the Yun family were all ready to offer up their lives for the future of their clan. However, they had never expected that Yun Dao Lai would face the pursuit of an Overgod as soon as he left. Originally, they did not treat the Overgod with any importance, but when he uttered, Mo Cheng, shall be taking the spiritual root of heavenly ways, they learned of his identity. Although they wanted to help, they were unable to break free from their battle until the 5th Prince's group arrived in the end. They understood that an injured Yun Dao Lai would be unable to escape from the Neptunean divine palace while the supreme Overgod who ranked first on the Overgods plaque hunted him down. Not only would they lose the spiritual root of heavenly ways, but they might even lose Yun Dao Lai's life as well. As a result, they could only tell the 5th Prince of the Sky Empire about the spiritual root of heavenly ways, as they had run out of options. They would assist the fifth prince in obtaining the spiritual root of heavenly ways. It was not like their Yun family was going to be able to keep the spiritual root of heavenly ways. They would much rather offer it up to the fifth prince instead of having others take it. This was because their Yun family was located in the Sky Empire. If they used this opportunity to closen their ties with the fifth prince, the status of their clan would rise up once the fifth prince ascended to the throne. Beside him, Cheng is a supreme god king from the god king's throne. His name is Tsang, ranked 950th on the god king's throne. It's said that he can survive 3 strikes from a regular infinite prime, a middle-aged man with a scholarly appearance said sternly from beside the fifth prince. Do we have the people to block Tsang? The fifth prince frowned. The middle-aged man mulled over it. He said, if I work with the 2 siblings, Bai Qi and Bai He, we should be able to block Tsang. The fifth prince was secretly surprised. He said in a gruff voice, this Tsang ranks towards the bottom of the God King's throne, yet he still requires Mr. Shu and the siblings to stop him. Is this Tsang really that powerful? Mr. Shu, you're also a God King who has made it onto the God King's throne. The middle-aged man said solemnly, although I've made it onto the God King's throne, I've failed to enter the rankings, so I'm technically no supreme God King of the God King's throne. As for this Tsang, not only did he made the rankings, but he even surpassed 50 people on the God King's throne. His strength cannot be underestimated. All right. Once we meet Tsang, we'll have Mr. Shu and the siblings stop him. Let's speed up, the fifth prince said deeply as his blood boiled. Once he obtained the spiritual root of heavenly ways, his future would be bright. He would definitely ascend to the position of emperor, and he might even become an ancestral emperor. Don't worry, your highness. The 2 of us will properly try the expert on the God King's throne, a big bald man chuckled behind the fifth prince. He was Bai Qi. Next to him was a black-clothed woman who possessed a sense of wildness. She seemed to be in her 30s, and she was Bai Qi's younger sister, Bai He. The 2 siblings were peak God Kings. Although they were not supreme God Kings on the God King's throne, the 2 of them believed they could take on a supreme God King if they worked together. Yun Weifeng and the others were unable to say anything. Although their Yun family also possessed late God Kings, Mr. Shu and the siblings were on a completely different level. At an identical cultivation level, the cultivation method practiced, battle skill grasped, and laws comprehended could differ, so battle prowess would be at different levels as well. There were even some cultivators who possessed special bloodlines, allowing them to erupt with supreme battle prowess through the power of their bloodlines alone. Compared to these people, the God Kings of the Yun family could only be considered as rather ordinary. The barrier of energy in the divine medicinal garden distorted heavily. More and more people attacked the barrier, causing its energy consumption to become extremely rapid. Quit hiding your trump cards. Everyone, use battle skills and unleash your full strength, someone called out in the garden before immediately casting a powerful truth tier battle skill. Immediately, the barrier of energy shook more and more. A huge crack had even appeared, where the violent energy gushed in through there, causing havoc inside. It turned into a storm, causing Yun Xian to stagger. Master Chanlong's face changed just as he was casting down another formation. Immediately, he stopped and devoted himself to stabilizing the barrier. However, the God Kings outside struck out with their full strength. Even with the support of abundant energy, even with Master Chanlong personally keeping it stable, the barrier still shook violently. Cracks appeared as it seemed like it was about to shatter from the burden. The supreme-grade divine crystals placed in the crucial point of the formation dulled at a visible pace as well. Oh no, we can't last much longer, Master Chanlong growled sternly. Kaya stopped healing and stood up. She was solemn. Chen stared at the space ring in his hand. After hesitating slightly, he suddenly took out the spiritual root of heavenly ways and raised it high up. He called out, everyone, you're all fighting for the spiritual root of heavenly ways. It's in my hands right now. Chen's voice rang out loudly, startling all the people in the garden. They all focused their attention on the spiritual root of heavenly ways as burning desire appeared. For a moment, they all stopped attacking the barrier of energy. The spiritual root of heavenly ways was only 3 inches long, and it seemed like the root of some plant. It seemed like nothing special, except for the fact that the truths of the world revolved around it with the power of the universe. Hand over the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Many god kings called out in the garden as they all stared at the root. Chen sneered. He held the spiritual root of heavenly ways in one hand and forced open Xian's mouth with the other. Before she could agree, he suddenly shoved it into her mouth. Xian was startled, and she actually became slightly flustered at that moment. She wanted to say something, but all she could produce were those muffled sounds. She was unable to resist at all. God damn it, stop. Stop. If you destroy the spiritual root of heavenly ways, I'll chase you to the ends of the world. Bastard, I will never spare you if you do that. All the god kings in the garden were furious. Their eyes all reddened as they attacked the barrier desperately. Many of them looked at Chen with resentment and heavy killing intent. Xian had consumed the spiritual root of heavenly ways. When she realized just what she had eaten, Xian was completely stunned. She just stood there blankly. Now that the spiritual root of heavenly ways is gone, are you still going to fight for it? Chen stared at the people outside coldly as a heavy killing intent radiated from him. He said, "If you stop right now, I can forget about what you did in the past. But if you insist on continuing to attack us, I will definitely kill you. You don't need to doubt whether I have the strength to do that or not. I've killed plenty of god kings when I was an overgod, let alone now that I've become a god king," Chen said coldly. The clamorous garden immediately quietened down slightly. Many people stared at Chen, who stood in the barrier of energy. He was bloodied and covered in horrific wounds, but he still gave off a surprising presence. Their feelings were mixed. Many of them looked at him with gazes of hatred. Clearly, Chen's threat had managed to form a certain level of deterrence, making many of the god kings around show fear. He was a supreme overgod who had easily defeated Cheng. He had killed early god kings while he was still a late overgod. Many of the god kings in the divine medicinal garden shivered when they thought of such great battle prowess. Now that Chen had reached the level of god kings, no one knew just how great Chen's battle prowess had advanced to when they thought about the battle prowess he had possessed as an overgod. Don't be afraid, everyone. He has only made a breakthrough in comprehension. His cultivation hasn't advanced, and he's heavily wounded, so he can't last much longer. His presence right now is completely faked. He's actually about to collapse. Don't be tricked by him. A single late god king is enough to easily kill him. The spiritual root of heavenly ways has just been consumed, so it shouldn't have been digested completely yet. Let's get through the formation immediately and kill that woman. Maybe we can retrieve the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Chen's threats did not frighten everyone. There were still a small fraction of people who had not given up on the spiritual root of heavenly ways, and they looked down on Chen. They fanned the flames in an attempt to get everyone to band together and continue with their previous actions. Chen snorted coldly. Killing intent surged from his body as his gaze locked onto a mid-god king who was urging everyone on. He directly charged out of the barrier and used the Tai sword technique. He turned into a sword as he shot through the air as a resplendent streak of light towards the mid-god king. After Chen's comprehension of the laws of the sword had reached the major achievement of sword spirit, not only did his strength increase, but the power of his various sword techniques had strengthened several times over as well. The mid-god king sensed that Chen was attacking him, so his face immediately changed. His laws condensed as he struck out with the power of his cultivation as well. He comprehended the laws of water, one of the 5 elements. In terms of offense, the laws of the 5 elements were not as great as the laws of the sword, the laws of destruction, and so on. After all, those were the laws with the greatest offensive power. Moreover, the laws of water possessed some of the weakest offensive power among the 5 elements, so when the mid-god king strike collided with Chen, his attack directly exploded. Meanwhile, Chen, who had become a sword, continued onwards without slowing down, cutting off the mid-god king's head. The mid-god king's face changed drastically as surprise filled his eyes. Immediately, he abandoned his body and controlled his head to fly up. He made his way towards the entrance of the garden as he opened his mouth wide during that time. He seemed to be shrieking out while fear filled his face. However, as his head had separated from his body, he was unable to produce any sounds at all. His face was completely warped from excruciating pain. Suddenly, the top of his head exploded, and a soul fled from there. It emitted a series of mental pulses, allowing everyone in the garden to hear the painful screams the soul gave out. A strand of sword chi had already invaded his soul, rapidly wreaking havoc. It made him go through hellish pain. In just a few seconds, the God King's soul was completely destroyed under everyone's gazes, making it completely disperse. As for Chen, he had already returned to the barrier of energy as he stared at everyone emotionlessly. He said nothing. Instead, his silent coldness and powerful battle intent pressured the God Kings in the garden drastically. Many of them looked at him differently now. At this moment, Chen seemed like an undefeatable god of war in everyone's eyes. He seemed like an undying devil. He was clearly unimaginably injured, yet his battle prowess was still surprising. It made many people shiver. At the same time, a group of people charged up the winding path that led to the garden. The group consisted of around 50 people, and they were all god kings. In fact, the majority of them were late god kings. They were the people who followed the fifth prince of the Sky Empire from the profound Thunder Plain. The 9 god kings of the Yun family were also with them. Dao Lai. The god kings immediately discovered the heavily injured Yun Dao Lai as soon as they entered the divine medicinal garden. With a flash, they arrived before him. The 10 surviving god kings of the Yun family were reunited now. However, none of them were in the same shape as before. Every single one of them was soaked in blood as they suffered from injuries of various levels. They were extremely depressed. You're Yun Dao Lai. Do you have the spiritual root of heavenly ways? The 5th prince of the Sky Empire arrived before Yun Dao Lai. His eyes stared at Yun Dao Lai closely as burning desire and urgency filled his gaze. He was ready to do anything to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways now because it would directly connect to his future accomplishments. Yun Dao Lai's expression was extremely mixed. He did not say anything. Instead, he glanced nearby. All the people in the garden were gathered there, forming a huge encirclement. All that could be seen from outside through the gaps between the people was a barrier of energy. The 5th prince followed Yun Dao Lai's gaze and frowned slightly. The divine medicinal garden is covered with formations, so it's impossible to escape through the sky. Mr. Shu, please clear a path. The scholarly, middle-aged man beside the 5th prince nodded slightly. Then a fan appeared in his hand. Immediately, the fan emitted a terrifying pulse of energy, causing all the origin energy in the entire garden to fall into disorder. Vaguely, the laws of the world there seemed to be affected to a certain degree as well. The fan in Mr. Shu's hand caused all of this. Mr. Shu held the fan. As he poured in his origin energy, the fan immediately shone with a blinding light. In the next moment, the fan was like a slumbering ancient beast awakening, emitting a force enough to shake up the world. Everyone in the garden was startled. Their faces changed, and they all stared in Mr. Shu's direction. It was also at this moment that Mr. Shu's fan opened slightly as he directly swung it at the people before him. With that, the entire world seemed to be flipped upside down. It obscured the light from the blazing sun in the sky, causing the world to darken. A dark whirlwind swept towards the god kings in the divine medicinal garden as it whistled. Everyone struggled to remain still when the wind appeared, causing them to stagger about uncontrollably. Even late god kings were affected. Many overgods and early god kings were directly blown into the air, striking the rocks nearby. They all became disoriented. In the blink of an eye, the overgods and god kings that numbered over 1,000 in the surroundings were all forced back by several hundred meters from Mr. Shu's fan. Everyone who stood in the energy barrier was naturally exposed before the fifth prince. The god kings of the Yun family all stared at Mr. Shu in shock. Disbelief filled their faces. Mr. Shu's strength had shocked them deeply. God artifact. Yun Weifeng stared at the fan in Mr. Shu's hand as he cried out. The 10 god kings of the Yun family could not help but stare at Mr. Shu, who held the fan, as they all revealed shock as well as obvious envy. They knew extremely well just how valuable god artifacts were in the saints' world. Taking their Yun family as an example, they possessed 2 great elders who were infinite primes, but only one of them possessed a god artifact. Moreover, it was a low-quality god artifact. The other great elder still used supreme-quality saint artifacts. Mr. Shu, according to my knowledge, only primordial realm experts can use god artifacts. Below that, it's impossible to unleash any of its power at all. Otherwise, you would suffer from a huge backlash. May I ask how Mr. Shu is able to use a god artifact so easily? Yun Lianqing asked politely as his opinion of Mr. Shu changed. The fifth prince glanced at the god kings of the Yun family. On any other day, he would definitely ignore them with his status, but he was in a great mood when he thought about how he would soon obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways. He took the initiative to explain, "That's right. Under ordinary circumstances, it's impossible for those below the primordial realm to unleash any of the power of a god artifact. It's basically no different from scrap metal because the artifact spirit of every single god artifact is extremely proud. It's impossible to gain their recognition below the primordial realm. Moreover, even if you gain the recognition of the artifact spirit, the power needed to use a god artifact is still not something that regular god kings can sustain. This is why only infinite primes can use god artifacts as they wish." However, Mr. Shu's cataclysmic onyx wind fan doesn't actually belong to him. Instead, it belongs to a subject of our Sky Empire, who is also Mr. Shu's master. The artifact spirit of the cataclysmic onyx wind fan has received orders from Mr. Shu's master. Coupled with the portion of power stored in the fan by his master, Mr. Shu can unleash the fan's might at a very small price. The god kings from the Yun family were enlightened. They could sense that Mr. Shu's master was definitely a great person with supreme cultivation. Seeing how willing he was to give his disciple his god artifact, he did not worry about his disciple being killed and his god artifact being taken away. For example, although a great elder of their Yun family also possessed a low-quality god artifact, he would never give it to them. With the path ahead cleared completely, the fifth prince arrived before Chen's group. They stood outside the barrier of energy as they stared at Chen inside. "Are you Cheng, who ranks first on the Overgods plaque?" The fifth prince looked at Chen as he furrowed his brows, asking him a question with uncertainty. He had heard from the people of the Yun family that Cheng had hunted Yun Daolai down after he fled with the spiritual root of heavenly ways, and that there was a supreme god king from the god king's throne beside Cheng. As a result, the fifth prince believed that the spiritual root of heavenly ways had ended up with Cheng. Now that he saw Chen and the others being encircled by so many people in the garden, he naturally believed that the person before him was Cheng. The part that made him furrow his brows was that although he had never seen Cheng, he had heard about the supreme overgod who ranked first on the Overgods plaque. The person before him seemed somewhat different from the rumors. Moreover, he did not see the supreme god king who accompanied Cheng either. The god kings with the fifth prince studied Chen's group with a strange light. Only the god kings of the Yun family showed extremely strange expressions, apart from Yun Daolai. Xaner, Chen, Kaya, Chanlong, how are you here? Yun Lianqing cried out in surprise. Astonishment filled his face. Apart from Yun Daolai, the other god kings of the Yun family stared at the people in the energy barrier blankly as they showed doubt. The fifth prince's face sank slightly as he suddenly felt an ill omen. He looked at Yun Daolai and asked, "Where's the spiritual root of heavenly ways?" "Daolai, this is the fifth prince of the Sky Empire." Yun Lianqing arrived before Yun Daolai and explained. He was afraid that Yun Daolai would offend the fifth prince when he did not know who the latter was. Fifth Prince, the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Yun Daolai seemed to be completely stupefied. He stammered as his face paled. He was not stupid. When he heard that the person who came was the fifth prince of the sky Emir, he knew what the other people of the Yun family had decided. It was exactly this that made him feel fear. If he still possessed the spiritual root of heavenly ways, he would not be like this. He would not be like this either, even if Cheng had taken it away. However, the spiritual root of heavenly ways just happened to be eaten, and the person who ate it was Yun Xian. The spiritual root of heavenly ways is gone, said Chen as he walked out of the barrier steadily. He studied the fifth prince and his people before locking onto Mr. Shu in the end. He was extremely stern, and he immediately told Master Chanlong to keep up the formation secretly. The fifth prince's face changed drastically. He glared at Chen and exclaimed coldly, "What did you say? The spiritual root of heavenly ways is gone." The spiritual root of heavenly ways was a treasure that determined whether he would be able to become a chaotic prime in the future. He was willing to do anything to get his hands on it. Even if Cheng had taken it away, he would go as far as to offend Cheng to take it back. I already ate the spiritual root of heavenly ways. Yun Xian walked out as well as she basically tried to choke back her sobs. She could clearly sense that the spiritual root of heavenly ways had already dissolved within her, turning into a power that constantly improved her talent. The spiritual root of heavenly ways possessed the truths of the universe, and it was created by taking the fortunes of the world. It was not violent like regular god-tier heavenly resources, where weaker people would explode if they consumed it. As a result, Yun Xian felt no discomfort after she ate it. Xianer, what did you say? The expressions of the god kings of the Yun family changed drastically. If the circumstances were different, they would definitely have been overjoyed. They might even laugh aloud. However, they only shivered now. They felt fear and unease from the bottom of their hearts. The fifth prince's face sank. He stared right at Yun Xian as he could not help but tremble slightly. This was caused by extreme anger. Chen's heart sank slightly from the fifth prince's response. He glanced at Yun Xian beside him before trying to make it up to the fifth prince. It is Yun Xian's great pleasure to have consumed the spiritual root of heavenly ways. If she receives further nurturing, her future accomplishments will be immeasurable. Becoming a chaotic prime will not be wishful thinking for her. At that time, the Sky Empire's strength will greatly increase on the profound thunder plane such that surpassing the other eternal empires is only a matter of time. I am Chen, and I'd like to congratulate the fifth prince beforehand. I'd like to congratulate your Sky Empire in becoming the greatest eternal empire on the profound thunder plane. The fifth prince did not waver at all. His expression remained the same as he looked at Yun Xian with great unease. In reality, his fuse had already been completely blown inside, where he was tempted to immediately execute Yun Xian on the spot. Yun Xian also paled as she felt unsettled. Your Highness, you must have seen it as well. When we entered the divine medicinal garden, Xianer and them were under attack from basically all the god kings here. Under such tight circumstances, Xianer had no other choice but to consume the spiritual root of heavenly ways. I hope your Highness can forgive her for this, Yun Lianqing said uneasily from behind the fifth prince. The fifth prince before them possessed great authority in the Sky Empire. Countless people would respond to his call. He was one of the three princes who were most likely to succeed the emperor. As such, he was greatly favored by the current emperor. And he had the support of peak sects in the Sky Empire. He was so powerful that their Yun family could not afford to offend him at all. The hearts of all the god kings from the Yun family sank completely when they saw how the fifth prince remained silently with a darkened expression. Suddenly, the fifth prince's closely furrowed brows loosened. He let out a warm and enchanting smile, immediately making the people of the Yun family experience a pleasant feeling like they were standing in a spring breeze. It was as if all the negative emotions within them had vanished at that moment. Congratulations on consuming the spiritual root of heavenly ways, Miss Yun Xian. If your journey in cultivation is successful, becoming a chaotic prime won't be an issue at all for you." The fifth prince smiled at Yun Exayan. Afterwards, he clasped his fist towards her gently under her surprised gaze and said, "Miss Yun Exayan, you must know my identity already. I hope that you can marry me. I wonder if I will be able to satisfy Miss Yun Exayan." Although the fifth prince spoke warmly and politely, there was some sharpness in his gaze towards Yun Exayan. All the people who understood the situation knew that the consequences would be horrible if Yun Exayan did not agree. Yun Exayan's pale face became even whiter. She wanted to decline, but she could not bring herself to say it. This was because the fifth prince had already phrased it in a way that no matter what reason she used to decline him, she would be finding him unsatisfactory. Without a single doubt, the Yun family would face a huge dilemma in the Neptunean divine palace. They might even face a disaster. At the same time, Yun Exayan constantly heard secret but helpless messages from the god kings of the Yun family, telling her to just agree to it first. In the current situation, the people of the Yun family were out of choices. Only through compromising could they ensure the safety of the clan. Yun Exayan gritted her teeth. Despite her reluctance, she still agreed to marry the fifth prince. "I will definitely devote myself to cultivation in the future. When I truly become powerful, I will make the fifth prince regret today." Yun Exayan made up her mind inside after the humiliation she experienced today. Right now, it was only a verbal agreement at most. As long as they did not get married, they would not be husband and wife. The fifth prince laughed aloud. "Good, good, good. From today onwards, your Yun family will be one big family with me. Exayaner, once we return to the profound Thunder Plain, I'll immediately report this to father before holding a grand marriage together." The fifth prince's unhappiness completely vanished. Although he had failed to obtain the spiritual root of heavenly ways, the root would not end up in the hands of others from a certain sense as long as Yun Exayan became his wife. Moreover, he would definitely possess an advantage in the fight for the throne through his connection with Yun Exayan. "Exayaner, let's go. You'll accompany me in the future. I'll show you the scenery of the Neptunean divine palace." The fifth prince made his way up and directly held Yun Exayan's hand. Yun Exayan frowned as she twisted her body unnaturally. She wanted to break free from the fifth prince's grasp, but she discovered that she was unable to resist at all. Immediately, her face changed slightly, and she looked at Chen beside her. Previously, for the sake of the spiritual root of heavenly ways, he had engaged in a great battle against Cheng before stopping so many god kings in the garden. Yun Exayan had witnessed all the hardships he had gone through. When she saw how he was all bloodied and covered with horrific wounds, she felt a pain in her heart for some reason. Yun Exayan could not help but have two regretful streaks of tears run down her cheeks. She thought about how she had made trouble for Jian time and time again because they had taken up the 3 spots that originally belonged to her good friends, as well as how she had treated him when they first entered the Neptunean divine palace. The fifth prince saw all of this. He looked at Chen and asked gently, "Exayaner, who is he?" There was deep disdain towards Chen in the fifth prince's voice. "Your Highness, our Yun family encountered the 3 of them along the way here. Due to the fact that we have limited god kings, we offered the remaining 3 spots to them. In exchange, they became temporary guards for Exayaner to ensure that she would not be injured," Yun Lianxing immediately explained before Exayaner could say anything. He understood the fifth prince quite well. Now that Exayaner had become in wife in name, he was afraid that the fifth prince would bear grudges and turn on Chen and the others as a result. "Exayaner, is that true?" The fifth prince looked at Yun Exayan. Yun Exayan nodded and remained silent. The fifth prince glanced at Chen deeply before leaving the garden with everyone. Master Chanlong emerged from his formation with the fifth prince's departure. He let out a long sigh, "And I had thought we were definitely going to be in for a battle, so I cast down several formations as quickly as I could. But fortunately, this battle didn't happen, or else even with my formations, we would struggle to stop that group of people. One of them has a god artifact after all." Jian sighed gently. "I wonder whether getting Yun Exayan to eat the spiritual root of heavenly ways was the right decision or not." Although she gained a great fortune, she basically went from out of the frying pan and into the fire. Before she truly powers up, she won't be able to cut her ties with the fifth prince. Kaya made her way out as well. She stood beside Chen and looked at his bloodied figure before showing a sliver of mixed feelings. She said calmly, "Was it worth it? Some things can be done, while some can't. It's not about whether it's worth it or not. But this matter is in the past already, and Yun Xian has left with the fifth prince. Our agreement with the Yun family is basically completed." Jian continued after some thought, but the fifth prince completely saw what Yun Xian showed when they departed. The fifth prince is not a kind person. Who knows whether he'll move against us or not. As a result, we can't stay in the divine medicinal garden for now. We need to leave immediately. I just need some time to increase my cultivation, and at that time, I think there won't be many people who'll be able to pose a threat to me anymore. Afterwards, we can come to harvest the god-tier heavenly resources here. Chapter 2052, Entering Seclusion in the Neptunean Mountains. Kaya and Chanlong had no objections to Chen's suggestion. They all understood that even if their group no longer feared regular late god kings when they worked together, they were still not the opponents of extremely powerful late god kings. Mr. Shu, who accompanied the fifth prince, was far more powerful than a regular late god king. Aside from Mr. Shu, there were probably other supreme god kings from the god king's throne. Once they encountered them, they would struggle to emerge victorious even if they worked together. As a result, they urgently needed to increase their strength. After all, many god kings had already gathered on the 8th floor of the Neptunean divine palace, unlike the floors below that mainly consisted of overgods. I also need to enter secluded cultivation so that I can break through to God King as soon as possible, said Kaya. Late overgods would be disadvantaged in terms of both cultivation and comprehension when they fought against god kings. After making up their minds, Chen and the others immediately left the divine medicinal garden. Xiaozheng did not plan on leaving by himself, so he stuck with Chen's group. Fellow Chen, if you are in search of a place for secluded cultivation, I know somewhere that's extremely suitable for you. Xiaozheng had already entered the Neptunean divine palace many times, so he was extremely familiar with its interior. He led the way without even being asked, "Fellows, please come with me." Afterwards, Chen's group covered a distance of over 1,000,000 kilometers in an extremely short amount of time under Xiaozheng's lead. In the end, they stopped before a verdant mountain range. Chen was surprised as soon as he entered the mountain range. Not only was the origin energy there over 10 times thicker than elsewhere, to the point where it even formed mist, but Chen even seemed to feel that the laws of the world had become clearer in the mountain range. According to ancient records, this mountain range is the holiest collection of mountains in the Taoist sect of Neptunia. It's called the Neptunean Mountains. It's said that the Neptunean Mountains are also the most blessed lands of the Taoist sect of Neptunean. There are extremely profound formations in the center of this mountain range, and it's exactly because of these formations that the Neptunean Mountains can directly take the fortunes of nature and gather the mysteries of the universe. Not only is the purest origin energy gathered here, but cultivating here can even deepen your understanding of the laws of the world. As a result, cultivation is significantly easier here. Xiaozheng clearly knew a lot. He studied the mountain range in amazement as he explained to the trio. It said that the strongest ancestor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia had close ties with the Grand Exalt. The formations in the Neptunean Mountains were cast down by the Grand Exalt personally, so it was an ungodly piece of work. All the formations abide by nature and contain the truths of the world. The Neptunean Mountains were originally located outside the Neptunean Divine Palace, and it was a place especially provided to core disciples for cultivation. However, it was only moved in here when the Taoist sect of Neptunia faced the calamity, so it has always remained here. Xiaozheng, it looks like you really do know a lot, Chen said calmly. Xiaozheng chuckled. The Taoist sect of Neptunia was originally located on the Hinyu plain, and I was born there as well. I'm from the same place as the Taoist sect of Neptunia, and I've already entered here several times. Coupled with me inquiring everywhere, I do know a little more about this place. As they exchanged these words, the four of them had already entered the depths of the Neptunean mountains. Along the way, Chen could clearly sense that there were many powerful presences within the mountains. Clearly, quite a few people chose to cultivate here. In the end, the four of them chose a secluded cave as a place to cultivate. Master Qianlong cast down formations to separate them from each other. It was to protect them and prevent any disturbances. Chen immediately entered secluded cultivation. He had already prepared the resources he needed for a breakthrough with the chaotic body. Not only did he have the God King level monster cores he had obtained from the Een Mountains of Seven's to spare, but he also had the energy crystals from the space beasts they had killed during their journey. These resources were enough for him to reach the 12th layer successfully. Kaya and Qianlong entered seclusion as well. Kaya healed first before beginning to cultivate. She comprehended the mysteries of the world in an attempt to break through to God King. As for Qianlong, he took out the space ring he had obtained from the 7th floor and checked through the items in there. Clearly, the owner of the space ring was a formations master. Qianlong found quite a few records and comprehension for the way of formations in the space ring, so he immediately went through them closely. The 5th prince of the Sky Empire and his people stopped beside a small stream to tidy up. This place was over 1,000,000 kilometers away from the Neptunean mountains. Many of the guards were covered in blood, clearly having just emerged from a battle. The 5th prince sat on a boulder as he examined a fist-sized brown fruit in his hand. He smiled faintly as he murmured, "A dark spiritual fruit. It's the main material for refining a soul-purifying pill of earth and spirit. That is a 4th-grade God-tier pill, and it can rinse the soul of impurities and purify your mind. It's quite a rare item. These people really haven't disappointed me. They sure do have some pretty good things on them." The 5th prince had just stolen the dark spiritual fruit from a group of people. Even though they were not weak, the people he brought in had still slaughtered them easily. "Exiner, this soul-purifying pill of earth spirit will have extremely obvious effects on you right now. It can amplify your resonance with the laws of the world such that comprehension will become even easier. I'll collect all the materials for the pill in the Neptunean Divine Palace, and I'll especially ask a subject of the Empire to refine it for you." The 5th prince held the fruit as he turned his head to talk to Yun Xian beside him. He spoke very gently. Yun Xian, on the other hand, was in a daze as she sat on the boulder. Her gaze did not shift at all, making her seem like a statue. She completely missed the 5th prince's words. "Xian." The 5th prince could not help but speak louder. "Ah. 5th prince, what is it?" Yun Xian looked at the 5th prince in confusion as if she had just woken up from a dream. "Xianer, look at my eyes," said the 5th prince. He stared at Yun Xian without blinking, and in the next moment, a gray swirl suddenly appeared in his pupils. It possessed a mysterious power as if it was going to suck away Yun Xian's soul. Yun Xian immediately fell into a daze. Her attention was completely drawn away by the gray swirls in the 5th prince's eyes as she became lost. "Xianer, tell me, are you thinking about that person called Jian? The 5th prince asked. His voice was very simple, but when Yun Xian heard it in her current state, it was enchanting, sucking in her attention. "Yes," Yun Xian replied stiffly. In such a situation, she was unable to hide any secrets at all. She told him the truth. Nearby, Yun Lianqing's face suddenly changed. He could not help but worry for Jian Chen's safety, but he knew that there was nothing he could do. The other people of the Yun family became stern. They were not worrying for Jian Chen. Instead, they were worried whether there would be any consequences for Yun Xian. The 5th prince's face sank as he had already crushed the god-tier heavenly resource in his hand. Sticky and fragrant juice covered his entire hand. I just dash," Yun Xian returned to her senses, and as soon as she thought of her reply, she paled. Although her mind had been temporarily lost just then, she completely remembered what she just said. She thought about it herself and realized that she was just referring to thinking about the days she had spent with Jian Chen's group. However, when the 5th prince heard Yun Xian's answer, the meaning naturally changed completely. She wanted to explain, but she understood that whatever she said might just be taken as an attempt to cover it up. Let's go. The fifth prince did not delve on the matter. He called his people and set off once again. However, he secretly said to a few people behind him, Bai Qi, Bai He, go with Heya to find that person called Jian Chen. Execute anyone who's with him, including Jian Chen himself. Find a time to leave secretly. I don't want Xaner to know about this. Bai Qi and Bai He were the two most powerful people in the fifth prince's group apart from Mr. Shu. The fifth prince directly sent the siblings to deal with Jian Chen's group. Clearly, he could tell that they were extraordinary as well. Heya just happens to have seen that kid in the past. No matter how far away they are, as long as Heya has seen them, he can find them. Your Highness, don't worry. I guarantee you that we will complete this perfectly, Bai Qi responded secretly. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.